Yeehaw, we're live. Hi, guys.
Describe what it is that we're going to be going over. Yeah.
Hey, Diane, good to see you. This is only a couple of hours old, Diane, 10 hours old.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to American Vindicta. Myself and Tim Alberino just had ourselves about an hour-long conversation about something interesting going on in Peru. I'm just going to turn it right over to Tim, and we're going to talk about a alien threat or an attack by gray aliens that's happening in Peru. We got some information on it. We're going to cover it, kind of walk our way through this, so bear with us. Tim, you want to describe what it is that we're going to be going over?
Yeah, as you said, you and I were just having a casual conversation about the events that have been transpiring in Peru over the last couple of weeks. And we decided, let's turn on the cameras and record this conversation because this is, I think it's quite compelling, actually. I'm not 100% sure what to make of it yet, but it is very compelling for several reasons. And I can set the stage here, and then I know you want to show some videos that we were discussing, but to set the stage.
Yeah.
Something very strange is happening.
I just saw that, Diane. It just come up on my post as well. I might play that at the end.
In the Peruvian Amazon, specifically in the village of San Antonio, which is in the Amazon jungle. It's in the district of Alto Nanay, northwest of the city of Iquitos. That's serious jungle. How do I know that's serious jungle? Because I have spent a lot of time.
We're on the same content, Diane. We are always on the same content.
Precisely
same page
in
with
that
content.
region of the jungle. These are members of the Iquitu tribe, Iquitu, I-K-I-T-U, Iquitu tribe. And there aren't many members, only a couple of thousand members of this tribe, and this is part of their territory. They're in the Alto Nanay. They have a village, and this village has been, apparently, according to these villagers, has been attacked repeatedly over the span of a couple of weeks at least. So this incident has been ongoing. I think the news is just now breaking about it. And by the way, what we're about to talk about is all over the Peruvian news, all over mainstream Peruvian news. I've been watching mainstream Peruvian news for the last 2 days, and they're covering it in a very interesting manner. They're covering it in a serious.
We're all on the same page, aren't we? We all watch the same information. I watch the first 5 minutes to see how it's going to go. Then I save it to watch with you guys.
Way. And I would even use
Cactus,
the word
good to see you,
I
mate.
mean, they're very, almost as if they're frightened by what they're talking about. So it's the Peruvian news is not joking about this. RPP Noticias and La República and different Peruvian newspapers and news outlets are taking this very seriously. So, as I said, this is occurring in the village of San Antonio with the Iquitu tribe. So they've been apparently under assault during the night by entities, let's call them. We don't know what they are. We don't know if they're human beings dressed in costumes. We don't know if they're alien entities, but the villagers are calling them extraterrestrials. In fact, the villagers are specifically calling them pelacaras, which means the face peelers. And we'll get into that after I finish describing what's been occurring. So apparently during the night, this particular village has been, let's say, terrorized by a group of very strange entities. These things are about, according, and I'm just going to give I'm going to give a brief explanation of what the villagers themselves, a brief summary rather, of what the villagers themselves have been saying. They're being attacked by these 7-foot tall entities. The entities have bulbous heads. Their eyes have been described in various ways. They are dressed in very strange bodysuits, silver. They've been described as armored and silver. So silver armored bodysuits is the way that they're being described. These entities actually attempted to abduct a 15-year-old girl, but the girl managed to break loose from their hands and escape. And the struggle resulted in lacerations on her neck. And there's footage and images of this young lady, and indeed she has lacerations on her neck in the photos and video. She was also, after the encounter, was in a state of shock for a few hours. Like, she couldn't talk. She was in a complete state of shock. She was absolutely terrified. All of the villagers are terrified, terrorized, really, I think is the appropriate term here. The beings are described as having footwear with discs on the bottom, with a red light emanating from the heel portion of the footwear. And these discs apparently allow these beings to lift off the ground and float through the jungle about 1 meter off the ground. And apparently they can also lift off into the air through the agency of this technology they're wearing on their feet. Again, according to the villagers. And as you'll see in the videos that we're going to play, the villagers actually they shoot at these entities with rifles and shotguns. And a couple of the villagers said they hit them. They shot right at it, but it didn't do anything to these entities. They just disappear or they take off. So that's it in brief. I should also say that the villagers, the reason why this came to the news, that it's gotten, first it got national coverage in Peru and now international. And the reason why is because the villagers were demanding that the Navy intervene. The Navy. Okay, this is a village on a river in the Alto Nanay, and we'll show a map in a little bit. And so they were demanding that the Navy come up, and that's why they want the Navy, because the Navy can get there quickly. There's a Navy base not far from that area. And so they're demanding that the Navy come and intervene and protect their village. They're saying they're not getting any sleep. They're staying awake all night. And so the whole story is actually very compelling. And again, I want to reiterate how this is being covered in Peru. It is not being covered as a joke, as a farce, as a hoax. The manner in which this story is being covered by the national press is very serious. So I think that encapsulates what's been happening.
Hey, Chris, good to see you, mate.
Frame here is
I didn't see you there.
The end of July, the last couple of weeks of July is when this, and I think it's the last occurrence happened about 5 days ago, I think, or at least the very end of July. So this isn't something that happened yesterday. In fact,
okay, guys, and don't forget that that ET, that meteor that landed in Vegas, and they had them 2 ETs in the backyard. So it seems like they're coming to Earth now because they're attacking Peru, and they've come to Earth in Las Vegas. So things are really heating up here.
The Peruvian Navy did indeed respond, and the police and the Navy are on the scene right now investigating, and they've been there for a couple of days. And so that's what's been happening, and it's very remarkable. In light of the Vegas incident that occurred in the United States, was that last month, I believe. We talked about it, you and I, and Dave Hodges. We discussed that Vegas incident, I believe, the very night of the occurrence. And so as you and I were talking, it seemed appropriate to jump back on and discuss this occurrence, this incident as well, especially since I have some familiarity with this area of the jungle, and some very strange things have happened to me in this region as well. I don't think I'm going to go into the details of those strange things tonight, but I have a connection to this region of the jungle. So it's when I didn't know where it was at first, and so I started investigating, watched the news, the media coverage, the Peruvian media coverage of the incident, and I realized as they were talking, I realized that, my God, I've been in the neighborhood of where this occurred, and perhaps is continuing to occur. So Doug, why don't you go ahead and play a video so that people can see some of the footage, and you're going to hear some guys talking, and that's I've already reiterated what they're describing.
You want to start with the Phil Schneider, or you want to go straight to the other one?
No, let's go straight to the incident, the videos of the incident that was captured by the villagers. And in the video, by the way, one of the guys who happens to be the tribal leader of that village, he is describing these entities, these beings, as I said, they're in bodysuits, silver bodysuits that appear to have some sort of armoring, and so he likens them to the Green Goblin from the Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, tricky. They could be programming us. I'll agree there.
And he talked.
We just got to be aware of what they're up to.
Talks about masks. They talk about these beings wearing masks, but I don't think that's actually what's going on here. I think that we'll get to that. We'll get to that in another video we're going to show. All right, go ahead and play this one.
Desesperados se defienden contra un atacante que desconocen.
So here they are, actively shooting at these beings, filming it on a cell phone.
Se trata de habitantes de la tribu Iquitu del distrito de Alto Nanay en Loreto, quienes denuncian ser víctimas de violentos ataques por parte de seres desconocidos.
Wow, so they attack them during the day as well. Hi, Mars, good to see you, mate.
This is the village leader, the tribal leader of the village here. He says they're extraterrestrials, and then he's describing how they're dressed. He said he shot at them, but they don't fall down. So they just get up and then they lift off into the air. So here you see the police showed up, and then some other videos you'll see the Navy. He's talking about how they have like discs
good day,
on the bottom of
Shawnee.
their shoes.
Didn't see you there, mate.
And they elevate off the ground. And they have a red light emanating from the bottom of these discs. And here's the 15-year-old girl. Go ahead and play that, Doug. There's the 15-year-old girl. They're blurring her face, but there she is. So go ahead and pause right there, Doug. So this particular news report, they're blurring her face, but I've got some news reports here that I've been watching where they don't blur her face, and you can clearly see her neck she has a couple lacerations on her neck. You can kind of see it in this video. You see the red.
You see the blood.
Yeah, there's blood there, and there's some sort of bandaging there on her neck.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of any type of attack or wound?
Yes. We're going to get into that in a minute, but so you can see the blood, you can see the bandaging. Apparently, she was physically grabbed by one of these beings, and I also heard one of the guys from the village describe these beings. This isn't the first encounter they've had with these beings. We'll get into that in a minute. Sometimes they encounter them wearing dark cloaks with hoods, and they attack at night, and they're trying to grab people at nighttime, and they're described as I don't like to use movie references, but they're described as almost like the predator from the movie, where you can see them and then suddenly they sort of almost go totally transparent, but you can still sort of see them there, but they just blend into the jungle. So it's some sort of a cloaking technology that these villagers are describing. Now, let me say, right off the bat here as we begin this discussion, I don't know what to make of this. I'm not here saying, and I know Doug's not here saying that we believe these people are being attacked by extraterrestrials and that we're 100% certain that they're telling the truth. I mean, we can't know that. We're way over here, and I'm way over here in Montana, very far away from this area. And all I can do is sit here and read the news articles and watch the videos in the Peruvian press. However, I do have a lot of experience with these tribal peoples from this specific region in Peru. Not this particular village, mind you, but all around that village. I've been all through there. Okay, I've been in this jungle, and again, have had very, very strange things happen to me in this jungle. So do you have the map that I sent you, the map link you can pull up? Okay, so can you zoom in on that map? Or is that a picture? Do you have it as a picture? Okay, good. So I want you to zoom in on the word Masan. Do you see it right in the middle of the screen?
Yeah.
Down, right there. Right here. You see that word Masan? Go ahead and zoom in there. All right, so, and lower it down a little bit. Okay, zoom out just a little bit. I want to see the city of Iquitos. So there's Iquitos. You see Iquitos on the bottom? You see Iquitos, and you see Indiana, and then you see Masan to the left of Indiana. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting this is because I've spent a lot of time in Masan and Iquitos as well, but I've spent a lot of time in Masan. In fact, I had a nickname when I lived in this area of the jungle. My nickname was Masan. Some people called me the Lion of Masan, and for various reasons. So, you see Masan, you see the river that branches up to the northwest from Masan. That is the famous Napo River. And there's a lot of headhunter tribes and a lot of historical intrigue.
I think Diane posted yesterday, was it you, Diane, that the Americans are about to declare bankruptcy? I saw that somewhere.
Up there, up that river. Now zoom in on Masan. You're going to see when you zoom in, so Masan's a little village. Now you see this river that branches off the left here. Follow that river. You see Santa Teresa,
wow.
And it goes over to La Libertad on the Masan River. So there's a town there called Libertad. It's not even a town. That's not the right way to say it. It's a community called Libertad. It's very, very small. I spent a lot of time with those people. I have good friends that live there. They're hunters, and they're just villagers there in Libertad. Now, that river, you see how it jets up to the northwest? I've been all the way to the top of that thing. So deep, deep, deep into the jungle. That's a malaria red zone, by the way. If you zoom out from there, and I've been to the left, so I've been up that river and off to the left down a tributary that's doesn't even show up on this map because it's not big enough to be seen from the satellite. This is uncharted territory. It's really uncharted jungle up there. In fact, if you look at it on certain maps, you won't even see the river. It only goes so far here on certain maps. Now, zoom out a little bit, and you're going to see what's right to the left of it. Go ahead and zoom out. Right to the left, this highlighted area, this dark heart, that's Nanay. That's the district of Nanay. Okay, that's where this incident happened. Now, I have been inside of Nanay. I went up there. We canoed deep into the jungle up in that region. On a particular...
Yeah, a bit of an ego, the line of Nanay.
On a particular expedition. But I actually spent a lot of time up the River Masan. And there's nobody up there. I mean, up there, River Masan, you only have... you have madereros, who are lumberjacks, basically, illegal lumberjacks. And you probably have some drug traffickers, and I've run into both. But look how close the River Masan is to the region of Nanay.
So what?
And again, the region of Nanay is highlighted here. It's the darker highlighted area. That whole area is the region of Nanay. And the main city of Iquitos is there to the right of that region. You fly into Iquitos. Iquitos is only accessible via airplane or boat. There's no road that goes to Iquitos. It's literally in the middle of the jungle. And that is, by the way, officially where the Amazon River starts. Okay. So that's just a little bit of a geospatial context here. And if you zoom out, you'll see where we are in Peru. Go ahead and zoom out. So we are in the northeast part of Peru, in the Amazon basin. That is Amazon jungle. That main river branching off there to the right, that's the Amazon River. Okay. So I have a lot of history in that area. And that's why this story is so intriguing to me for two reasons. First and foremost, because of my own experiences out there. I did not experience these particular entities or anything like what these villagers experienced. I had a completely different kind of scenario unfold. However, I am very familiar with the legends and the stories that are told of the cryptids and the other kind of creatures that are encountered in the jungle in general, but specifically
Yeah, Tim has got a bit of an ego, and he doesn't admit that the ETs are fallen angels. I don't think he admits that.
That area as well. And again, throughout the jungle, these stories are ubiquitous throughout the Peruvian Amazon.
I hope he's not going to sit here for the next 2 hours talking about the jungle.
Probably into the Brazilian Amazon as well, but I'm sure that the nomenclature changes when you cross the border. So there's a particular legend, let's call it. It's more than a legend because it's not something that is it's not an old tale. It's not a story about something that happened a long time ago. So legend isn't really the appropriate term. It's more of an ongoing myth, a living myth, let's call it, an active myth concerning these entities that are called pelacaras. Pelacaras. And pelacara means face peelers. Pelacaras, face peelers. So that's face and then peeler with a P, like as if you're
Okay, now I'm interesting. Face peelers. And when I hear that, I picture Clinton doing that little girl's face. Yeah, that thing. I think that might be a satanic thing. Face peeling.
Peeling the skin off of a face. That's what these entities are called. And the people are terrified of them. Why?
Yeah.
Because apparently these entities, every now and again in the jungle, abduct villagers and mutilate them. And their bodies are discovered oftentimes with all or portions of their face totally ripped off of their skull. And that's why they're called pelacaras. And I believe, if I remember the legend correctly, the mythos correctly, they usually abduct adolescents, but I don't know if I remember that exactly right. But these,
you know what? When the shit hits the fan and things are really bad and there's no food around, you can have a gold bar weighing 10 pounds, but you're not going to be able to buy food with it.
If you go into the jungle, the Amazon, especially in this region, and you start asking people about the pelacaras, they've all got stories. They've all seen the pelacaras, and they know about people who've been killed by these entities.
I know, and so,
these villagers, when you read the news articles and you listen to the commentary on the Peruvian coverage of this incident in the media, these villagers and the other native peoples around this area that they're interviewing are saying that these are pelacaras.
Diane, let's hope what happens to Disney is what happened to Budweiser when they went gay. Disney gets away with too much. They'll get away with doing this.
Attack them, face peelers, and that the pelacaras are extraterrestrials. Again, that's not Timothy Alberino saying that, and I'm not trying to affirm that that's the case. I'm just telling you, I'm relating to you what they say. Pelacaras are extraterrestrials that come and abduct people. Now, what makes this very interesting here in the jungle, because as you all know, I'm let's say well read in the abduction material. What makes this very distinct from your typical abduction scenario that's happening all over the world to millions of people every day, every night, is that the Pelacaras, these abductions are brutal. These abductions are brutal. So we have in the United States, and Doug, we've talked about this and you've experienced this firsthand, we have cattle mutilations in which someone's cow, let's say, is discovered in the field, totally mutilated, but mutilated in a very interesting way, not by animals, not by deprivation, not by animals. Rather, they're mutilated in a very surgical way. And we've gone through that before. We don't have to go into all those details. But sometimes, and in fact, I would say oftentimes, these cattle are discovered with a side of the skin on their face gone, peeled off, apparently.
I get it now. Yeah, I get it now. Travolta and Cage, they done that Face Off. I was wondering why you brought that up. Then I just remembered that Face Off movie.
Like surgically removed.
I actually
so
liked
that all
it.
You see is the bone structure. You see the jaw, you see the teeth, you see the bone structure, but no flesh. And so that leads us into this next video. Why don't you go ahead and play that next video, Doug?
Oh, so you think Face Off the movie was about skin ripping faces off, skin peeling faces off? Makes sense.
Yeah, this is about to get wild.
And so this, now, before we play this video, I cannot find you. I don't know what the origin of this video is. I don't even know, to be honest, I don't even know what the context of the video is. It purports to be a video that was filmed in 2023, this year, and from Loreto, Peru. So Loreto, by the way, is the state in which this occurred. So it purports to be from this year in the same department, the same state where this village is located. So go ahead and play that. So what you're looking at here are two Peruvian, they look like two gentlemen who either are police or civilian police or something, maybe detectives. Their vests say police, and they're taking the banana leaves off of this man who's lying on the bank of a river. And I think we determined that he was deposited there for the police. So they're removing these banana leaves, which people used to cover him. You're going to see why people covered him with his head with banana leaves in a moment. Again, those are their vests say police, so let's assume those are Peruvian police. Now they're picking him up. And look at his head.
No way! Wow!
It is bereft of skin. At least I'd say 3/4 of it, if not almost the entirety of his face is gone. Not partially gone, completely gone. And you'll see if you back up a little bit, Doug, because I think that's where, well, there he is laying on the ground. So let's see. Is that the end of the video?
Yeah, it just beats.
Okay, so back up, and you're going to notice that his face was removed with surgical precision around the neck there. You see that? There's a circular cut around the neck. Now, is this video real?
Yep, bro, Bat Travolta, exactly, Tricky.
Is it authentic? Or is it photoshopped or edited in some way? I don't know, but I think it'd be very difficult to edit this video because you're looking at somebody's cell phone footage. So we're looking at somebody's cell phone, a Peruvian villager's cell phone that they captured, presumably. And there's a lot of movement. You see all the movement. Look, they drop him. The police officer falls and drops him. I mean, it doesn't look like prosthetic to me, and it does not look like CGI. Now, again, I don't know what
And was he alive when his face was peeled off? Because we know Hillary Clinton done that to some little girl on the dark web.
The context is of this video, but I'm going to guess that this has something to do with the pelacaras. And when these Peruvian people call these beings pelacaras, I think we're looking at why they call them the face peelers. Again, allegedly this happened this year and is from the same general region of Peru where this village was attacked.
And he hasn't picked this up yet, but there's no blood anywhere.
It's really quite disturbing.
Well, you can see that it appears to be rigor mortis has set in.
Yes.
I've seen my share of dead bodies. If even the movement right there, you can see the spine articulating.
Yes.
If this was a movie prop, my hat's off to you. That is the most convincing movie prop I've ever seen. But you can tell that the guy has weight to him. This guy right here, the policia, he slips coming up the embankment. If this was going to be a movie, it was shot very poorly, but we have not been able to discern yet if this is a movie, if it's a spoof. That seems to be a dead man. I've seen my share of that. I have never seen an injury like this. I've seen people blown apart, lacerated. When I worked in federal prisons, I've seen people stabbed up, gutted, have their face cut off before. But there's, it seems like he has been exsanguinated. There's no blood. There's no blood coming out of anywhere. Look, the face will bleed more than almost anything else because the hundreds of capillaries that are all over the face, and there is no flesh anywhere. There's no burn marks from what we can see on here. And you can even see the scalp line where the fatty tissue is.
Exactly.
And the way the neck articulates as they're moving. I mean, it takes 3 men to move a dead body. That's fairly accurate. A person who's completely, limp is a very, very heavy weight. And what we guess is that someone came down the river, deposited this man along the side of the river for the police to then go and collect him.
I don't think it's acid on his face, guys. If someone throws acid on faces, there's still skin there. It's just all melted and horrible. Like, if it was acid, how come there's no scar on the bones? Like the skull's not decolored or anything?
It's likely the criminal investigators who are here.
I can say that we can confirm that this particular video was uploaded.
There's
to
the
YouTube.
coroner.
Right, there he is. Yeah, this particular video was uploaded to YouTube on August 2nd. So this may be very recent, and it may in fact be directly related to the incident in the village. These villagers were being terrorized by these ostensibly extraterrestrial beings. I mean, that's just, that is very grotesque. I've never seen anything like that before. And again, this illustrates why they call these entities pelacaras, the face peelers. And I think we are, in my opinion, again, for all we know, this could be a hoax. I don't know. Yeah. But my gut feeling is that this is not a hoax. This is real. And we are looking at a human mutilation as a...
What would be the motive for a hoax? Why would they set this up as a hoax? It doesn't make sense. There's no motive for a hoax.
Opposed to a cattle mutilation, we are looking at a human mutilation.
I want to say that he appears to have some sort of a burn here on his right shoulder.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And bruising along his left that you can see from the chest to this shoulder. It almost looks like this arm was out of socket, but the body moves really weird whenever it's limp and dead. So there's some sort of another injury. You can see the color tone right here is different. If it was hit by a radiation, I can only speculate. I don't know of any instrument that can do this.
Yeah.
I mean, that steam would do that. Steam can melt you right down to the bone, but that would be a 3rd-degree burn. And even so, you would still see blackening
Yeah.
possibly. You would still see blackening along the epidermis, and you're not really seeing that. You can see where most likely this is a pool of blood where he's been laying down at. When the body is when the body dies, the blood will pool wherever the body is laying flat at. All right, so you can see most likely this is where the blood was pooling at in the body. And like I said, it's some sort of an injury right here. So if something came and it hit him like this, or
Shawnee, India has a big problem with that. Jilted boyfriends throwing acid in the girl's face. It's absolutely terrible and horrible, but that's their culture. They do it a lot.
or from right here. But once again, that's a cut right here.
Well, what we're looking at, as I said, it's a human mutilation. Just think cattle mutilation, but done to a human being. That's, I believe, what we're looking at. Now, there's extra compression going on through Zoom. The video is actually a little bit clearer on YouTube. So there's some extra compression going on. And people say, well,
oh, hang on. Press the wrong button.
And people say, well, why is it so pixelated and so forth? Because we have a crappy cell phone filming another crappy cell phone. That's why. So you're looking at an image that isn't very high res to begin with, that was apparently filmed by a Peruvian. And I say a Peruvian because I can see her sitting there. You can see her feet here in the video. She's sitting there showing somebody footage that, again, presumably either she took or somebody else took and showed it to her. So this is quite astounding. Again, we don't know if this is real. This could, for all we know, this could be a movie prop. Somebody's going to say, oh, this is from a movie, and put a link in the comments. Okay. But I think, again, to illustrate what we mean by what these jungle folk mean by pelacaras, I think we're looking at what they mean by the face peelers. This is at the very least, I think, a good illustration of what face peelers do. And we very well may, to reiterate, we very well may be looking at the result of an attack by a so-called pelacara, face peeler. So let's talk about some other things that are very, very intriguing regarding this incident that happened in this village in Alto Nanay. One thing that stood out to me right away when I began to research this incident is that the villagers are claiming that these entities are over 2 meters tall. Specifically, they're describing them as being around 7 feet tall. So that rings a bell immediately, because we referenced the Vegas incident. During that Vegas incident that happened last month, I believe it was last month, correct? No, it was the end of May, was it not? The very last night of May, I believe, is when it occurred.
Right.
The first hours of June, I think, is when that happened. And those people described very tall alien beings. And I think the one kid said 10 feet tall, another one said 8. I saw some footage from the Vegas event. By the way, the jury's out in my mind on the Vegas event, on the Vegas incident. I don't know if those guys were telling the truth. I don't know if they were embellishing, if they were confabulating. But I'm just going to tell you, my gut feeling is that they're telling the truth, and that there was some sort of a non-human entity stalking around in their backyard. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that there is a particular, and I wish we had it ready to queue up here, but we didn't want to bother to take time to find it, but I'm sure many of you have seen this already. There is a particular video that has been extracted from the news channel's video that they took. And remember, they were walking to the backyard during this news broadcast. They're walking into the backyard with these gentlemen who called 911 about these aliens in their backyard. So they're walking into the backyard and they shut the cameras.
That's the one we were talking about earlier, guys.
And before they shut the cameras off, you can see the forklift this isn't like a regular backyard with grass. These people apparently work on cars or something, so they have sort of looks like almost like an enclosure with gravel on the ground, and they have forklift back there and some other things. And you can see the forklift in the background. Now there's two things I want people to jettison from their minds right away. Don't think about that fake CGI, alleged camera footage of that alien creature. That was totally fake CGI garbage. And don't think about the video of the up close of the fence with allegedly an alien creature looking through the cracks or whatever. I'm not referencing those two videos. There's another video where somebody zooms in on the forklift, and you can see. Now, is the video real? I don't know. Is there CGI in there? Was it edited? I don't know. But you can see a large gray alien being sort of ducking behind the forklift, but you can clearly see his bulbous head and black eyes, and you can see his head move. I don't have a link to that video. We don't have it to queue up right now, but maybe some of you have seen it. If not, I would go look for it, because it's the most compelling video of that whole incident, Vegas incident. You can see a gray alien, and that being, when I'm looking at the forklift, and in my head, I was watching it with my wife, and I said, that looks like a 7-foot tall gray alien. It's exactly what I deduced. It looks like it's about 7 feet tall, maybe 7.5 feet tall, maximum 8. It's a very tall gray alien. Now, that's strange to a lot of people, because you all hear me talk about gray aliens all the time. And we know that gray aliens, one of the distinguishing features of a gray alien is its diminutive stature. They're small. They're 3 to 4 feet tall, or 3.5 to 4 feet tall. And they have the bulbous heads, the almond-shaped eyes, and so forth. They have the long fingers, 3 fingers. And the interesting thing here is, with the Vegas incident, is we're looking at what appears to be a gray alien, but a 7-foot tall gray alien with the same characteristics, the same features, the bulbous head, the almond-shaped eyes, but much, much larger, 3 times the size of a typical gray alien. Now, that's interesting. That's interesting. Obviously, it correlates here to what these villagers are saying they saw in this jungle village that was terrorizing them, attacking them, attacked this 15-year-old girl. But it's also interesting because...
Wow, that link, Diane. Wow.
As the late Phil Schneider talks about these beings in detail, these exact beings, tall grays that were living under the ground when he was building an underground base, when he was an engineer on a project. I believe it was under Los Alamos National Laboratory. They were building an underground base there. So we can show that video in a couple minutes. But before we do that, let's return to the village in the Alto Nanay, and let's look at that other video. This video, I think, is the most astounding video. And in my mind, it correlates directly to the Vegas incident video, because I think we're looking at the very same species here, the very same class of beings. And we will discuss in a little bit what we think these beings may be, or at least the options. But let's take a look at this video, if you can cue that one up. So just to give some context, this is another night when they're being attacked by these, what they're calling...
There is where we zoomed in earlier.
You probably can't see that, but gee, there's 2 aliens there.
In what we think is the head, right here.
Yeah, so what we're looking at in this video, you have a lot of agitated villagers and a dog or 2 in here. These guys are genuinely agitated and terrified. Okay, you can hear it in their voices. I can understand what they're saying in Spanish. This is the jungle lingo. This is the kind of Spanish.
Tricky. I wonder why he doesn't admit they're fallen angels. I wonder why Tim Alberino doesn't admit that, because everyone knows it, but he doesn't do it.
I speak really well. So what's really amazing about this video, yes, it's blurry, yes, it's pixelated, okay, but keep in mind that these people living in the jungle, they've upgraded the smartphones by this time, but they've got the cheapest smartphones on the market. They're not walking around with your Apple iPhone, okay? These guys are buying Chinese knockoff phones that can barely capture video. That's why you're looking at such low resolution. And anybody who says, how come there's not a ton of video? Because not everybody in this little village, these Iquitu natives, even have phones, okay? So there's probably only a small percentage of them who even have smartphones, okay? So when you play this video again, what you hear in the beginning is you hear a man yell, there it is, as they're flashing a flashlight right on it. And they're trying to get the dogs in the backyard here as well. You can hear them saying, put them in the huerta. And the dog is obviously irate. And so the people are stunned.
Yeah, Tricky, that has to be the case, doesn't it? He's controlled info. It's got to be the case.
They're terrified, and they're shouting, there it is. And they're literally putting a flashlight on something. Now, what exactly that something is anyone's guess, but it is a something, and it is moving. And you can see, especially again, this is highly compressed because of zoom, but you can see in some of these frames, you can see two eyes and a bulbous head. Right there, you can see an eye, you can see the right eye there, and the top of the head. Now, let's assume that what we're looking at here is a tall gray alien, a 7-foot tall gray alien. The same thing that I described previously that was hiding behind the forklift in the video from the Vegas incident. Let's assume for a moment that that's exactly what we're looking at. If you look at that Vegas incident video and you look at this video and you take a good look at it frame by frame, you are going to see the same creature. This is the same, I'm not saying this is the exact same entity, but this is, let's call it the same species. If in fact these videos are real, we are looking at the same species. Tall, gray aliens that are around 7 foot tall, but with the same typical features of the small grays, the bulbous heads, the almond-shaped black eyes. And in fact, Doug, I don't know if you have the time stamp, but it appears that we can even see some shine from one of the eyes. Right there you can see, that was actually a very good still. You could see the two eyes and the head. And by the way, the head is slightly moving from side to side. You can see it slightly moving from side to side. Now, a lot of people are going to have right there. That's a very good. You can see the bottom of the face and the two eyes, the two almond-shaped eyes in the top of the head there, right? Now, this being is hiding behind foliage. So they're flashing a flashlight up into the trees, and this being is ducking behind foliage.
That was funny, Cactus. He's very pretentious, isn't he, old Tim?
Probably floating there, okay? And he's ducking behind foliage so that you see him through the leaves. You're seeing branches of trees and foliage around him. So don't think that this whole green blob is the being that they're pointing out. No, rather, you can see his head behind the foliage. And again, if you watch the video very, very carefully and closely, you will see his head move side to side, slightly, and up and down, slightly up and down. There, he just looked down. You see? He looked straight again. Did you see that, Doug? He looked down a little bit.
Yep.
Okay, now people may think, oh, I don't see anything, you're just making this up. Well, keep in mind again, I've seen a less compressed footage of this. Again, Zoom is adding some additional compression here.
You want to see the still photos?
To me, it's clear as day that this is some let's just say this, something moving behind that foliage. Something is there moving, and it appears to me to be the head of a large gray alien. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but it appears to me to be the head of a large gray alien. And it looks very similar to what I described in the Vegas incident footage. Okay, 7 foot tall gray alien. Now, why don't we go to the
Well, before we
Phil
do that,
Schneider clip?
I want to show the still photos. So this is what we were able to screen capture. This is the foliage that was in front of it.
Yeah, there's the foliage. There's
the eye.
There you go. 2 eyes, bottom of the head, bottom of the mouth. You can almost see, Doug, the circular. You see sort of like the oval shaped head where it's sort of going down there. You can see there's a line.
Guys, you probably can't see it because the screen's not big enough, but there is an alien grey looking head there looking around and that.
Sort of a shadow. Do you see? Go back to that picture. Go back to the other one that we're looking at. Do you see? You can sort of see right there. You can sort of see the outline of the bottom of the face. Now, zooming in doesn't help. But this entity looks, as I said, very much like the one at the Vegas incident. I would say identical. But also, it looks, again, I'll use the word identical, to the beings that were captured in the most convincing and compelling UFO footage I've ever seen, which was captured by Dr. Lair and another gentleman, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, and people are going to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I believe it was captured in Turkey.
Yes.
And I think people know the video I'm referring to. There's a craft hovering above the sea, and they zoom in. They're filming, and they weren't looking for aliens that night. They're doing something else. They zoom in. They happen to capture this. They zoom into it, and you can see 3 beings, and the beings look precisely like what you're looking at right now on our screen.
This is part of the eye shot.
There he's looking down there. You see? Yeah. Slightly looking down there. He's looking down and to his left, and this one he's looking more straight on at us. Okay. Now, again, some people are going to criticize me and say, no, you have a wild imagination. There's nothing there. It's just a green blob of nothing. But understand that these Peruvian jungle people are absolutely terrified. Okay. This is not a staged scene. These people are not acting. They are in a state of panic and terror. And remember, they were shooting at these things with rifles and shotguns, okay? And they described them in great detail. So I referenced earlier that the gentleman, the tribal leader of the Iquitu people there in the village of San Antonio, in Alto Nanay, described these beings as wearing masks, these extraterrestrials as wearing masks. I don't believe that they're wearing masks. Rather, I think that he's mistaking the typical gray alien face with the long almond-shaped eyes, the large almond-shaped eyes. He's mistaking that for a mask because these people are not going to be really familiar with ufology. They know about UFOs, ovnis, UFOs, but they're not going to be familiar with the details of gray aliens or anything like that. So I think they're assuming that these beings are wearing masks, when in reality, I think they're looking at the typical gray alien face there. So let's go ahead and listen to some of Phil Schneider's testimony, which again, so what I'm doing here for the audience, I'm trying to correlate 3 separate incidents here, okay? 3 separate incidents. The Vegas incident, the Peruvian Amazon incident that we're talking about here, and Phil Schneider's incident that happened while he was helping to build an underground base.
I don't understand what Bill Snyder's got to do with aliens attacking a town in Peru.
Under Los Alamos. These are 3 things. These are 3 incidents. I'm trying to draw a correlation here because I think we're dealing with the exact same beings. Go ahead.
Now, I was involved in something very controversial, almost totally unbelievable to most of you. During the unbelievable part, I was involved in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. It's a biological laboratory. On the southwest part of the Archuleta Mesa, we built an underground facility, a better part of 3 cubic miles hollowed out underground. Then to the southwest of that, we were in the process of the early stages of building. We drilled 4 large tunnel-like holes. Some of them ran 2.5 miles under surface. Number of the early at that time, number of the original wells or drilling machines that were used were at the rate of 2 miles a day. It was fairly rapid. The equipment kept coming up broken. So we wanted to go down, we wanted to send somebody down there, a human observer, or human observers in this case, to find out what was going on. Well, to our total surprise, first of all, the government knew all about it. They didn't tell anybody. When I saw...
So Tim hasn't got a big fan base. Should I switch to something else, guys?
Green Beret and Black Beret people encamped inside of our geologist camp, I knew something was up. The gig was up. First of all, I knew all about the alien agenda. I'll explain that in a few minutes. The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. It had been one of their internal bases. And we drilled holes right on top of it. All the stinking air, all the black sooty air came right out as soon as the first hole was sunk, and all this soot came up. And, well, that's when all the hell broke loose, really, all started. Anyway, after we drilled all 4 holes, it took about 2 days to drill all 4 of them. And when you build an underground base, you drill 4 basic holes, and then you build called stopes or cross-member holes across, and then you use blasting equipment and special blasting equipment by the analyzation of the rock formation, and you literally blast out or tunnel out or deflagrate or melt rock out to build the large rooms that are required for this underground base. Well,
yes, the glaring inconsistency is he doesn't give them credit as fallen angels. That's the inconsistency. I can't even say that word.
In this process, I was lowered down the basket of one of these holes, and about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. The person or the entity was absolutely horrible. I didn't waste any time to reach for my pistol. At that time, as an engineer, I didn't have time to carry all the folderol of one of these big submachine guns that all the sea spray and the yellow fruit and all the outer perimeter and inner perimeter security people carried. I carried a little Walter PPK pistol with a 9-shot clip. This is in late August of 1979. Now, you got a regular suit of clothes, you got a regular clothes on, plus you're in almost like a spacesuit environment, and you're reaching for a gun. It's not the easiest thing to do, and then to pop a clip in it and start shooting. And I killed 2 of them. Yes, they're mortal and they do die. However, in the process, one of them did this. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish. And burnt my fingers right off of me, and it was some form of electrical force because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me, completely crispy crittered my left foot, burnt the shoe right off of me. All I remember was the smoking remains, and I'm still conscious, but in and out of, I didn't remember much. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me that risked his life. In fact, he died. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. And I wouldn't be alive talking.
Diane, I didn't know Richie Cunningham knew Obama was gay. That's Richie Cunningham, isn't it?
Here today. Wasn't for him. I'm forever indebted. He lost his life. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat. There's a war underneath there, and I'm talking dead serious. Now, it gets to the big question. If all this has been hidden from us, everybody says, well, where's the proof? I've got some of the proof laying on the table. But Well, a lot of you probably are totally
You go ahead and
skeptical.
stop.
They say, well, that could be anything.
So obviously, Phil here was talking about what he calls large gray aliens, 7 feet tall. So there, again, correlation there between the Amazon incident, the Vegas incident. And they had some sort of technology. It waved its hand in front of its chest, and some sort of a beam emanated from this entity's chest and struck Phil, or rather technology around this entity's chest, and struck Phil, and as he said, opened him up like a fish. And you'll see that, you know, as he talked about, he lost a couple of fingers, he lost some toes, and he got cancer. He had an aggressive cancer after that incident. So maybe you're right, Doug, in speculating that man whose face had been ripped off or whatever, maybe it was some sort of an energy beam or something. Maybe the very kind of technology that Phil Schneider was hit with there under the ground. So I find this to be very, very intriguing. Is it true that these tall, gray alien beings have bases right here in the United States under the ground? Might they also have bases in the Amazon? But it's important to point out that, assuming that these entities are real, that they're not bestial, they're not primal creatures. These are very advanced beings with technology. Yes, very ugly, very grotesque beings, but nevertheless in possession of advanced technology. Okay, so let's speculate. Assuming everybody's telling the truth, right? Let's just assume, let's operate in an environment in which we are assuming that Phil Schneider's story, the Vegas incident, and the Amazon incident are all true. And now let's speculate at what we might be looking at in terms of these entities. Now, I think the most obvious conclusion that we could draw based on the data would be that these are, at the very least, biological creatures in possession of advanced technology that are not immortal, and that are, at least to some extent, operating in underground bases, operating in beneath the soils of America, perhaps the Amazon and other places around the world, that they have some sort of dwelling, habitation there. I think we can also assume that these same entities, these tall grays, are also in possession of advanced aerospace vehicles, that they're not confined to, let's say, the underground, but that they also, because of the kind of technology on display in all 3 of these incidents, they're also in possession of advanced technology from which they could derive advanced aerospace vehicles. In other words, craft. So I think that's the most obvious deduction. We can call them alien because they're obviously non-human. So maybe non-human intelligence is the best way to describe these. We don't know where they come from. We don't know how long they've been here. But again, assuming, working within the framework of these stories being true, we can conclude that they are here and that they're not good. These are very nasty entities. And
why don't you just call them fallen angels then, Tim? They're nasty entities.
And they're doing things that they're harming human beings. Apparently, this is part, by the way, of the famous Dulce War, the lore regarding this confrontation in the deep underground military base and the underground, generally speaking, in Dulce, New Mexico, where there was this large conflict and we lost some of our contractors and military personnel in that conflict. And they were killed. They were casualties of this war with these particular beings, these tall grays. So if that's true, let's now say that what I just said is true. Let's say that's true. Well, then my next question, my next line of inquiry would be, in what way are these beings related, the tall grays related to the small grays, the ones that we're more familiar with, the typical grays? Because obviously we're dealing with the same biological architecture here. They look the same. They're apparently the same, different, they're the same species, but of different statures. So I think we're entitled to then wonder if they're related. Are they related? And if so, are the larger grays actually in charge of the smaller ones? Did they create the smaller ones? Or are these larger grays simply the insectolins that we hear so much about in the abduction material? These very well may be the insectolins. It's hard to tell. I think if we could see the body frame, if we could see the arms, they had spindly insect-like arms and legs, and I think we could determine that these are the insectolins. But I've never seen enough of the certainly not in any of the three incidents that we've been discussing. There isn't the kind of quality footage or imagery to make a determination if these are the insectolins. But Schneider calls them tall gray aliens, or rather large gray aliens, and I think that's an appropriate description. So that's one possibility, that these are biological alien creatures, alien beings that are either primordial beings from planet Earth. In other words, they've been here for a long time and they've been inhabiting the Earth, the subterranean world, or they came here from somewhere else, or it's both. They've been here for a long time, but also they go back and forth, or they've come from somewhere else and they go back and forth to who knows where, another planet perhaps, the moon. I don't know. So that's one speculation. That's one possibility, and I would say, in my mind, that's the one that I would certainly lean toward. Now, there is another that I find intriguing. It doesn't necessarily correlate to these stories
it's in the bathroom,
in the same way, but was it last month or a couple months ago, Stephen Greer conducted what would you call it? What was it called? A conference in Washington, D.C., in which he brought forward a number of whistleblowers. Some of them were military people, and these guys had some very interesting stories to tell. In particular, and do you have the details for this, Doug? There was a particular gentleman whose story I would like to reference here. He was the Marine. Yeah. Do you have that video by any chance?
No, I don't. I couldn't break down the video, but I got from the Daily Mail. I got the write-up on it. It's an exclusive. Marine vet breaks down 14 years silence to make astonishing claim that his 6-man unit saw a hovering octagonal UFO being loaded with weapons, he presumed, by unmarked U.S. forces who threatened them at gunpoint while serving in Indonesia in 2009. Former Marine Michael Herrera tells the Daily Mail that he saw a UFO being loaded with weapons while serving in Indonesia in 2009. Herrera claims an Air Force lieutenant colonel told him, "You're not allowed to talk about."
Hey, John, good to see you, mate.
What happened? You will go to prison or you will die. He says he was emboldened to break his 14-year silence by the new UFO whistleblower protections, and in April testified under oath about this story.
Yes, and if I recall correctly, this particular story that this Marine told was linked to human trafficking, was it not?
Yes.
So he somehow deduced that human actors, and when I say actors, I just mean human beings, were using advanced technology that we had.
John, we're all on the same page here. A lot of the guys have already seen this as well. And it's only been out for 10 hours, but by the time I streamed, 2 or 3 had already watched it.
successfully reverse engineered from alien technology. They were using this craft, these advanced aerospace vehicles, to conduct clandestine human trafficking operations. And they were taking advantage of, was it a hurricane? I think it was a hurricane that had struck Indonesia.
It was a 7
And this particular Marine was there for a humanitarian operation. And it was in that.
John, the only thing wrong with Timothy Alberino, he doesn't say the ETs are fallen angels. So, yeah, that's not good that he doesn't say that.
Context that he had this encounter, not with aliens, but with human beings who were abducting people, and for the purpose of human trafficking, presumably for the sex trafficking industry.
Yeah, it goes on to say when a 7.6 magnitude earthquake struck Sumatra on September 30th, 2009, his 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines Echo Company, 2nd Platoon was rerouted to guard a helicopter aid drop around Padang City that was beset by violence from local insurgents. Around October 8th, he and 5 Marines were dropped off at a clearing in the northeastern part of the city by a CH-53 helicopter.
Yeah, John, he does a good cop, bad cop routine. There's good aliens and bad aliens. So, you don't come to Timothy Alberino for spiritual truth, just UFOs, just ET stuff.
And hiked 900 feet up a ridge to take their positions for the incoming supply drop. It was then that he spotted a strange object in the jungle on the other side of the hill. He says, I could see something moving and rotating. It was changing colors between a very light matte gray to a very dark matte gray, and it stuck out like a sore thumb. He said, oddly, they had not been given radios, so instead of calling it in, they edged down the hill in formation to investigate. And while Herrera snapped photos and videos on his Panasonic camera, he said the thing was massive, the size of a football field. The craft was rotating in a clockwise motion while changing colors. It had an audible hum to it, like the sound of a transformer or a guitar amp. It was octagonal in shape with a pyramid at the top of it that was also black. It had scales that were on the outside of the craft that covered the whole craft. It had,
and by scales, do you think he means?
John, I think I found American Vindicta because of you. I think I got the link from you.
That angular body armor?
You know, the way that they have it depicted in the picture, it almost looks like it was plating stacked on top of each other.
Okay. Yeah.
He said that it had seams and sharp edges, which is
John, can you post a link to Gates of Fire? If you guys all like it, I'd like to check it out too. Please.
Typical, which is not typical of the alien craft. The alien craft seems to be almost molded from a single material.
Right. It was serious enough that Aero actually took the report and accounted it in their investigation. So, you know, I mean, we gotta, when you think about Marines, you think about the integrity of Marines and telling the truth in this, and him being feared for his life. The contractors that he said were there came down. He said that they weren't supposed to be there, and that they could kill them. When the last 2 trucks finished unloading and drove off, he said that there were modified Ford F-350s that were beneath the craft. It sounds interesting, but when I was a contractor overseas, that's what we drove around in, was what we call up-armored Ford F-250s. He thought they were dumping ammunition. They scanned their military IDs. They disarmed them. He said, when the last 2 trucks finished unloading and drove off, the lower part of the platform rose off the ground to about 10 feet, and the craft lowered to meet it, and it came together into one piece. On the corners of the craft had lights that were changing between blue, red, yellow, and green. And it rose off the ground a little past the trees, then shot off to their left towards the ocean at around 4,000 miles per hour. Now, I don't know how you determine 4,000 miles per hour, but incredibly fast to the point that it's not natural.
It's atypical, right? it doesn't conform to any of the aerospace technology that we are familiar with, conventional technology.
Correct.
So, and what was the do you have there the connection to the human trafficking? Because that was the most astounding part of the gentleman's testimony. I listened to it live, and my jaw dropped.
Well, Greer said because they were loading a certain type of box that had holes in it.
John, what a coincidence. A couple of days ago, I was watching the actual historical story of the Thermopylae, the 300 Spartans. I actually watched that, not the movie, a bit of a documentary on it a couple of days ago.
That Herrera supposed that this was a box of ammunition or of weapons.
Thanks for that
and
link
one
to
of
your
the
book.
other whistleblowers who had not come forward yet said that he had experience with the same thing and that those boxes were used to move people. And then Greer goes on to say it's not just people that they were moving, but certain kinds of people with certain kinds of abilities. Greer goes on to then say that the people that they would abduct were ones that had psychic-like abilities or the ability to project their minds out, however you cut that.
Right. Which is what I've speculated that is that makes people candidates for abduction, alien abduction as well. So, okay, so now we've set up the second scenario. The first one being genuine aliens, or at least biological entities, non-human biological entities. Now, this scenario would be that what we have here in all three of these circumstances. Let's even set aside Schneider's experience and let's focus specifically on this incident in the jungle.
But Schneider's got nothing to do with this jungle incident or the Vegas incident. What's Schneider got to do with that? I don't know why he keeps tying Schneider in.
We have here are human actors who are in possession of advanced technology, who for some reason or other are terrorizing this village and are attempting to harvest apparently young ladies for human trafficking purposes. That's also on the table. It's a possibility. And of course, we have another possibility, which is the whole thing is fake. Not fake, but rather perhaps just completely exaggerated, and these people have seen something, but it's not anything like what they thought they saw. That's, of course, a possibility as well, but that's the most uninteresting possibility. So this could be human trafficking. It could be human beings in possession of advanced technology, which is, in my estimation, far more terrifying and deplorable than some kind of alien activity.
John, that's not a twig and berries, mate. That's meat and potatoes. That's a full-on meal. Meat and potatoes that Michelle's got.
Because this would be human beings harvesting other human beings for slavery, for sex slavery, and organs and whatever else. So that is certainly within the realm of possibility, and again correlates to this story that the Marine told at Greer's conference in Washington, D.C. So we have some interesting components in play here. I gravitate towards the first speculation that these are the same beings that Phil Schneider encountered under the ground as he was working on the underground bases, and the same beings that were encountered in Vegas, assuming that was that actually happened. It wasn't a hoax or something. So, and then of course, in the background of all this is my own experience in the jungle, my experience with these jungle people who do, by the way, tend to exaggerate stories. I can't deny that. These jungle folk do engage in exaggeration frequently, but clearly they were legitimately, authentically terrorized in the videos. And I do believe that they captured something on film there that they were flashing that flashlight on. And I believe it was gray alien.
Well, let me
7 foot tall, large, gray.
Let me ask you, you lived with these people. Are these type of people that know about TikTok clout and trying to gain money or revenue?
No. There would be nothing like that there. I mean, they would probably have Instagram accounts or whatever, because they would have very, very, very slow internet on their phones, maybe, and it would be some sort of satellite-based internet. You're certainly not going to have any kind of traditional internet access out there. It would have to be it would have to be satellite or unlikely satellite. Actually, it would most likely be through their mobile phone, their mobile carrier, their cellular carrier. So it's not uncommon for people in the jungle in this day and age to have smartphones. But a lot of these villages, people are too poor, so they'll have a flip phone or something, or very, very, very cheap smartphone.
I think Barrick's favourite meal is pork. I think he likes pork.
So, and they're not, from my experience, they're not, let's say, well educated in regard to ufology. As I said earlier, they know what UFOs are, and this is another important thing to talk about. See, in the jungle, encounters with UFOs are ongoing, always. And there are some very astounding encounters with UFOs, aggressive activity from UFOs for some reason in the jungle.
And you'd have to be lucky to see a UFO in the jungle because you're in the jungle. So there's no horizon to look at. You're stuck in the jungle.
And Iquitos is famous for this, by the way. That whole region is famous for this. Everybody's seen a UFO, and some people have stories. And also south of this area, in the more south and into the east, on the border of Brazil, especially around Pucallpa and some of those areas in the jungle, the Amazon basin still. You've even had incidents where there's been aggression in which people are pursued by saucers. And I even was reading about, and I didn't have the exact details, so I didn't want to connect it to what's happened here in this village. But I was even reading stories in which apparently recently a group of teenagers were being pursued by a UFO, and which was projecting some sort of a beam at them and trying to pull them off the ground into the craft. And this is not unusual in the jungle. I have heard stories like this in the jungle. I've seen many UFOs in the jungle, by the way.
And it's similar to the national parks in America. A lot of people go on missing in the national parks. Seems to be the same phenomenon, doesn't it?
I've seen stories like this. I heard stories like this in the jungle in which there is an aggressive posture, an unusually aggressive posture by these entities, by these craft in these villages, in which people are hurt. They actually are injured through their encounter.
Chris, it's hard to compete with Cactus and Tricky with the one-liners.
With UFOs.
You got to take your chance when you get it with them too.
And with the beings. That's not. It does happen in other parts of the world, but maybe because of the seclusion of the Amazon, maybe they can afford to be more aggressive without
being busted,
without drawing too much attention.
Yeah.
Whereas if there was aggressive encounters in the United States, there'd be a lot more attention. But away out in the middle of the Amazon, I mean. But by the way, this is, as I said, I want to make sure people understand that these stories are very common, and this particular area of Peru, of the Amazon, is very, very active in terms of UFOs.
Wow.
There's something interesting. I know there was a famous case in Brazil. I don't have the particulars in front of me, but there was a police officer, a local police officer or a soldier. They were on a patrol. This guy was like left alone for whatever reason, and he was chased through the jungle, hit by a light, abducted, and showed back up a couple of days later because they had this huge search party for him. And there's a documentary that
because he's a copper and he's gone missing, so there would be a huge search party.
Was made. I think you can find it on Amazon. And the guy goes and actually talks to his sisters. I think the soldier ended up dying, if I'm correct.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of stories like that from Brazil, actually.
So here's another thing. We know from at least here in Northern America, the abduction phenomena involves particularly mainly the little grays grabbing you by the hand and leading you out of the house, or you're being sucked out of your house.
Much more gentle procedures.
Much more gentle. You don't hear stories about
polite aliens.
Yeah, you don't hear stories about these large creatures with claws What do you make of that? The girl who was lacerated in the throat.
Tricky. Timmy's been to Peru. He's actually been to Peru. Wow. That's sarcasm, guys.
That's interesting.
Could that have been a big cat, possibly?
It could be anything. Of course, it could be anything. It could be ayahuasca, a bad ayahuasca trip for all we know. But it is interesting that she had those lacerations on her neck that she claims happened during her struggle to get away from these beings. So assumedly they had her in their clasp, in their grip, and she broke away. You get the feeling that we're not talking about her being captured in some sort of technology like a beam of light, rather actually having a physical altercation with the entities. So it does make you wonder how she received those lacerations on her neck. Was it through the fingernails, claws, or some sort of technology? Or in the midst of her breaking away and scrambling around in the jungle, was she cut simply by the foliage in the jungle, which is a distinct possibility. There's a lot of trees and branches in the jungle that are full of spikes, and there's a lot of nasty thorns, so it wouldn't surprise me. But her test...
And I'm pretty sure a native of the jungle would not go near them plants and then give them sores and cut them open. So, yeah.
Is that she was captured. They covertly grabbed her. She must have been, walking around in the outskirts of the village or something. I don't know the context, but they grabbed her. She freaked out, screaming, yelling, broke away and ran back into the village. And this is what really began the villagers. This raised the alarm. In the village. Okay. This is why they all came out with their rifles.
So the little girl was the first instant. Okay.
And their shotguns and with their flashlights, and began to try and look into, and probably in their minds to apprehend the perpetrator, probably someone who tried to rape her in their minds, I would imagine, right? And instead they start to see these strange beings, which we've previously described, to their great astonishment. And remember, these villagers demanded the intervention of the Navy, not just the police, the Navy. And the Navy showed up and is there on the scene, as far as I know.
Yeah, and this was a progression of events. This wasn't something over a series of months that we've learned so far. This has been within just the past couple.
But Tricky, he doesn't know what trees in the jungle bash you up.
Weeks.
Yes, it's mid to late July. It was unfolding over various weeks, and the villagers were having to stay up all night.
Wow.
They were being terrorized, and evidently there were multiple attempts by these entities to make an incursion and abduct some of these people. Now, it would be very interesting.
Guys, I know stories like in America where people were in a house out bush, like they're living in the country, and they were surrounded by ETs. I remember the story. The guy had a shotgun and everything, and it went on for a couple of hours. I wish I could remember the link, but it's some house in America that got surrounded by ETs, and it was like an all-night long battle.
And if we could, or perhaps one of the listeners could track down the origin of that video of the man with his face ripped off. And if we can verify that it has a direct connection to this incident, that would be very compelling. As far as I know, and what the news is reporting in Peru,
okay, I can't make out what his badge on his shoulder says.
That one 15-year-old girl was injured. So unless another man was killed, and they don't want to cause panic, and they don't want to cause more. They don't want people to be more alarmed than they already are, and they're not telling people about it. That was likely another incident from who knows when. But if that video of that man with his face gone, that is indeed the result of an encounter with a pelacata, with a I just forgot that translation in English.
The face peelers.
The face peeler. The face peeler. I was going to say the face ripper. I wanted to say face ripper. And I thought, no, that's not. Pele isn't rip, it's peel. So, but the face peeler, if that is indeed the result of an encounter with a face peeler, then we are dealing with something truly
barbaric,
truly disturbing.
Barbaric.
I want to get your
and frightening.
I want to get your opinion on this report. This is a declassified CIA report that I've had. I've gone over it before. I don't really know too much to make out of it, but this comes from the KGB, stationed in Ukraine back in '93.
The KGB, wow.
So what this says is after Mikhail Gorbachev dissolved in 1991, the KGB, Top Secret Intelligence Administration, a lot of material from that department found their way abroad, in particular to the CIA. As reported by the authoritative magazine Canadian Weekly World News, U.S. intelligence obtained a 250-page file on the attack by a UFO on a military unit in Siberia. And there are a ton of reports of UFO contacts in Siberia that I've now found. The file contains not only many documentary photographs and drawings, but also testimonies by actual participants in the events. One of the CIA representatives referred to this case as a horrific picture of revenge on the part of extraterrestrial creatures, a picture that makes one's blood freeze. According to the KGB materials, a quiet, low-flying spaceship in the shape of a saucer appeared above a military unit that was conducting routine training maneuvers. For unknown reasons, somebody unexpectedly launched a surface-to-air missile and hit the UFO. Old Private Ivan in his RPG hit a UFO. It fell to the earth not far away, and 5 short humanoids with large heads and large black eyes emerged from it. It is stated that in the testimonies by the 2 soldiers who remained alive that after freeing themselves from the debris, the aliens came.
Spoiler alert. Tim walks out of the UFO. That's a spoiler alert.
Close together and then merged into a single object that acquired a spherical shape. That object began to buzz and hiss sharply and then became brilliant white. In a few seconds, the spheres grew much bigger and exploded by flaring up with an extremely bright light. At that very instant, 23 soldiers who had watched the phenomena turned into stone poles. Only 2 soldiers who stood in the shade and were less exposed to the luminous explosion survived. The KGB report goes on to say that the remains of the UFO and the petrified soldiers were transferred to a secret scientific research institute near Moscow. Specialists assume that a source of energy that is still unknown to Earthlings instantly changed the structure of the soldiers' living organisms, having transformed it into a...
Wow, Diane, that's not good. They're letting mosquitoes out. They're dead set doing their best to create pandemics, aren't they?
Substance whose molecular composition is no different from that of limestone. A CIA representative stated, if the KGB file corresponds to reality, this is an extremely menacing case. The aliens possess such weapons and technology that go beyond all our assumptions. They can stand up for themselves if attacked. This was declassified May of 2000.
Well, that is quite bizarre. Quite bizarre. I think we are dealing with technology that, for all intents and purposes, appears to be magic to us. It is so far advanced from anything we have. These beings are capable of manipulating matter and energy in ways that we can't even conceive of yet, because they have an understanding of physics that we have not yet achieved. And so we are dealing with an enemy, a formidable enemy, the likes of which we simply cannot, we have no recourse. We cannot combat them and hope to defeat them. And this is why, in my book, Birthright, this is why I propose that all of this is setting us up for a scenario in which the human species is going...
No, Tricky, that's the Chinese wasp. $49 for the American wasp.
to need to be saved.
Not $55.
And the only kind of beings that can save us are beings who have technology equivalent or superior to the Greys or to whatever other factions are engaging us in hostilities. And I believe that, let's say for instance that incidents like the ones we've been talking about and the one you just read there in that report continue to happen and indeed burgeon. They increase in frequency. Let's say that happens here and that it becomes undeniable. Well, I think the world will be faced.
Yeah, made in China, tricky.
As I said, with the scenario in which we have an enemy with weaponry that is, again, so far advanced to anything that we possess, even our reverse engineered stuff, I would say, that we could not hope to prevail against these beings should we have a direct conflict with them. And we will need allies. We will need, let's say, extraterrestrial allies to save us. And I believe that therein lies the deception. Therein lies the real danger for mankind, because I don't believe that those allies will have our best interests in mind. And I believe that I believe that this corresponds directly to the unfolding of the events that are recorded in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, and generally speaking, the end times, the biblical narrative regarding the end times. Now, if you're a secular person listening to this and you do not subscribe to the biblical narrative, then what I just said perhaps seems ludicrous to you. But there is a very cogent framework here, a narrative in which all of this fits. And so I think we are slowly moving towards a revelation, let's call it disclosure, that includes the admission that at least some of these entities, these alien entities, whoever they are and wherever they come from, are hostile and pose a very real threat to humanity at large, not one nation over another. And let me dispel a myth very quickly here. There's been some images being passed around on social media that show the vast majority of UFO sightings happening within the United States. And people are saying, why is it that almost all these sightings happen in the United States, as if it has something to do with our government? Please understand that that's just because the vast majority of reporting happens in the United States. We have MUFON. We have the Mutual UFO Network. We have other organizations that are dedicated to reporting and cataloging UFO sightings and investigating them. And other nations simply just do not. And do not think for one moment that there are more UFO sightings in America, say, than Peru or Bolivia or Ecuador or Brazil. You would be gravely mistaken. There are probably more UFO sightings in South America than North America. And I would wager to guess that there are at least an equivalent amount of sightings in many other parts of the earth, including in parts of Europe and even the Mediterranean. So let's not be under this false assumption that the UFO phenomenon is localized to the United States. It is global. And the reason why I stress that is because, as we all by now have heard about the testimony of David Grush, the ex-intelligence community officer, who has come forward and has said that the United States has been recovering and reverse engineering crashed alien craft and the bodies and the pilots of those craft for decades. Do not think for one moment that has only been happening within the continental United States. Every major country on Earth has a crash retrieval program. every one. And there's probably an overarching organization, secret body, let's say very much like Majestic 12. Maybe Majestic 12 still exists and is still that overarching body that is coordinating and overseeing the recovery effort of these craft. And so it may not be that these other countries, say Peru, are communicating directly with the United States Department of Defense, let's say, but rather they may very well be communicating with an international body, an international organization of individuals who are higher in terms of their knowledge on this subject, who supersede any particular nation. And that these individuals have been coordinating, again, the crash retrieval and the reverse engineering of the alien craft. And the dice.
Exactly right, Cactus. We haven't heard him mention Jesus he's been going now for an hour and a half, and he hasn't mentioned Jesus once. That's what Emerald Dreamer does too. Just talks about Enoch, never Jesus.
Expecting and analyzation of and analyzing rather of the alien bodies. So this is a global phenomenon. And if indeed there is an announcement in the future that it is also a global threat, which it is in my estimation, then it is going to require a global response.
Okay, let's hear what he's got to say the global response will be. Because they do tell you what their plans are when they do this.
And people can make the argument and do incessantly online that this is Project Bluebeam. And in fact, they're probably already furiously typing out comments here in the comment section regarding how this is just another Project Bluebeam operation in Peru, and they're just trying to scare everybody into believing that there is an alien threat so that they can formulate a global governance and enslave us all, human beings, that is. And I would disagree with the first proposition, but heartily agree with the second. In other words, I would disagree that there's a fake alien invasion, but I would agree that there is a strategy, let's say, a conspiracy to formulate a global government utilizing people's dismay and fear regarding an alien threat.
Well, he's doing everything he can to skirt around them not being fallen angels. Everything he can do to not name them as fallen angels, he's just sewing it in. Timothy, we see you, mate.
I believe that there is an alien threat. It is real.
Well,
and the best proof that there is a real non-human threat is the abduction phenomenon and all of that material related to the abduction phenomenon.
Yeah, he's talking
all
to
of that, in my
yes.
estimation, indisputable proof, the evidence that we are dealing with at least one non-human faction that is, let's say, covertly hostile because they're abducting people. The abduction program is clandestine, as Dr. Jacobs always stresses. It's clandestine, but it's also hostile. And so there's at least one faction. I would say there's probably 3 factions that are hostile to the human species.
Wow.
And they're real.
Wow, 3 species that are hostile to the humans. Wow, that's pretty damning.
They're not a contrived threat. You see, Project Bluebeam is the notion that the governments of the world, or let's say the global cabal, is going to perpetrate a hoax on the citizens of planet Earth, and are going to, through advanced technologies that the public is unaware of, and through perhaps some kind of holographic ruse.
Project Bluebeam, Tim, just say it.
Are going to pretend as if we are all under this, that we are all being, and when I say all, I mean all of the nations, that we're being assaulted, confronted by a hostile alien presence, a UFO invasion, let's call it, right? And again, the problem with that hypothesis, with that theory, is the fact, in my estimation, that there are real hostile aliens. So once you have real hostile aliens in the equation, Project Bluebeam is irrelevant. It's entirely irrelevant. Now, I've spent a considerable amount of time talking.
So it's actually not irrelevant, Project Bluebeam. If they got ETs coming into our atmosphere and actually dealing with our superiors and all that, it's more than just a big deal, Tim.
The programs and other videos on my channel, and with you guys, with you and Dave and others, regarding how all of this fits more specifically into a biblical framework, and how these entities might relate to.
Okay, here we go to the crux of the problem. Is you going to say the biblical version that they're fallen angels? Here we go, the truth on Tim.
Angels, how they might relate to quote unquote fallen angels and so forth. So I'm not going to retread that ground here. We simply are out of time, but I do have a framework for that. And again, I can refer people to I will refer people to my book Birthright. If you're more.
Okay, so he never said, he said, oh, I'll tell you later on. Wow.
Interested in that. So don't think that I'm intentionally leaving that aspect out here. The purpose of
Yes, you are, Tim. You are purposely leaving that out. And the fact you picked that up shows that that's what you're really doing.
It was primarily to discuss this incident that's been unfolding in Alto Nanay in the Peruvian Amazon over the last few weeks. That was the primary purpose of our conversation, and not to wax theologically about extraterrestrials and how they fit into an end times framework. So I will certainly on my video, and I'm sure you'll do the same, Doug, put some links to some of the videos that we displayed here, that we featured in this conversation, so that people can take a look for themselves. And I would really actually like for the audience here to try and help us track down the origin and the context of that video featuring the man with the missing face, let's say. Is it real? Can anybody find when it was created and where and what the circumstances were? Because I think that's an important piece of evidence here that could help to advance the theory that what these villagers in the jungle are saying is happening is indeed happening. That, in their words, the Pelacaras are attacking them, these extraterrestrial entities, and are attempting to abduct some of the villagers.
I know if we had the ability, we would most likely be boots on the ground conducting our own preliminary investigation for this. You know, it's I think, like you said, we'll probably see more of this. We have to understand also that the governments control the narrative. They control the disclosure of the events, and they're also the ones who can hide most of this or threaten or kill the witnesses. And to your summations, do you think
Amen, Triggy,
the governments in South America, like what we have heard here in Northern America, are working with the tall grays?
I don't know. I suspect that there is an element of human society that is cooperating, that is perhaps even conspiring with one of these extraterrestrial factions. as people know, I do believe that at least some of these factions are of extraterrestrial origin. In other words, they come from somewhere other than planet Earth. I believe they have bases on the dark side of the moon, the Greys specifically. I believe that there are bases in the interior of Mars. And there are some people who believe, who've come forward and who have said that they have direct knowledge of programs involving underground bases on Mars, in which human beings, human factions, are working directly with the Greys for various purposes. Now, of course, there's no way to know that any of that's true, but I think as we move forward in time here, even the most fantastical stories may begin to become more and more plausible. So I'm not going to say definitively yes or no that we're working with the Greys, tall Greys. By the way, there's some confusion there. There's a group of entities that are known as the tall whites. I'm not sure they exist. That's based on a particular story from a particular gentleman.
That the Nordic faction.
But that would be distinct from the Nordic faction. The Nordic faction would be that species that looks very much like us, and then of course you have the Greys, let's say large and small, including the insectoids, and you have what I think are perhaps the most interesting, but the faction for which there is for which we have the least amount of evidence would be the reptilians. And I don't have any kind of evidence I can hang my hat on, like I can with the Greys. I don't have any kind of evidence that I can hang my hat on as it pertains to the existence of the reptilians. Yeah. But those are a few of the factions that are as I talked about with Richard Dolan in my conversation with Richard Dolan last week. Those are the factions that both Dolan and I believe to be real. I mean, if we were to have to say,
yeah, Tricky, that was terrible, wasn't it? I couldn't believe that. That's the reprobate mind, the mass lawlessness. I think the planet's getting saturated with the spirit of lawlessness. The whole world's going crazy.
Yes or no? Do these beings exist? Those are the ones that I would say, yes, those beings exist. Yep. But setting aside the tall whites, I just want to say that the tall whites are a completely different faction that's only related to a particular story in ufological lore. But the Greys...
Wasn't it the tall whites that gave Oppenheimer the atom bomb? I'm pretty sure it was the Nords, the tall Nords. I'm pretty sure that's true.
Reptilians and the Nordics, those three at least, I am very certain exist.
No, Shawnee, it's the Muslims pushing in Africa. The Muslims go into really poor towns and that and give the locals $100 a month to become Muslim. So it's a Muslim rape in Africa now.
Although, again, I have no evidence for the existence of the Nordics or the...
Yeah, they are, Tricky.
Well,
given over to the reprobate mind.
Based off your research, though, from South America to North America with the Native American tribes and the South American tribes, there has been quite a bit of lore that you've uncovered about the reptilians and portals and things of that nature.
Well, you have lores about reptilian beings, reptoid type entities living under the ground all over the world. You know, the famous Nagas from India. But there's no evidence that I've seen. Now, there's all kinds of stories of people, and especially women, who've said they've been...
There's no evidence. I'm telling you, he's an insider. He'd know the reptilians are true. Now he's saying there's no evidence. Wow.
Attacked by reptilians, and they have the marks on their bodies, lacerations, and so forth. But there's no way to determine whether or not they're telling the truth. But certainly there are legends.
I'm glad they did get angry, Shawnee. Good on them.
of reptilians all over the world, and they're almost always associated with like sort of the subterranean world. In Peru, there's a reptilian, particular god that was depicted as reptilian, or let's say perhaps even race that was depicted as being reptilian. And certainly in Peru, there's all kinds of legends regarding the human-like race, who they call the Viracochas. There's all kinds of stories that you'll hear regarding the Viracochas and their technology and their visitations in the villages of the Andes and so forth. So, but again, the only, and in my estimation, the only group for which we have hard evidence are the Greys. And I'm not saying that this video, by the way, in this incident I'm not saying that the incident in the Peruvian Amazon or the incident in Vegas or Schneider's testimony is hard evidence. That's not what I'm saying. I am referring to the abduction material. Therein lies the evidence of the Greys, and it's indisputable, in my estimation, from my vantage. So I think that we can conclude our conversation here. We'll see what happens with the unfolding of these events. If they continue to unfold, if we get more details, we might jump back on and supplement this discussion. But I think we've covered the bases. This is really one of the most fantastic stories I've ever heard. Again, it's near and dear to me because this is an area of the jungle that I'm, as I said, I am very familiar with. I've had malaria in that jungle several times. And I've got a lot of friends in that jungle, and I've been...
He knows all the guys in the jungle, guys. He knows them all.
Deep.
He catches malaria off them. They share malaria.
In that region, on both sides, by the way, on both sides of the Alto Nanay, up in the Masan region, which I pointed out, and then in the lower part of the Alto Nanay, on an expedition, an excursion, let's say, into the jungle. So...
oh, Cactus, you're talking about the Backer boys, aren't you, buddy? I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's very intriguing to me. And again, people are going to ask me, I know, what happened to me, my experience, but I've never actually told that publicly. It was not an encounter with the Pelacadas. It was not an encounter with UFOs. It was a totally different kind of scenario. Nevertheless, it happened in that region. So,
and I know that story because you and I, sitting in Peru, right underneath the what was it, Machu Picchu, in the hotel, smoking cigars. We had that discussion probably 1 or 2 in the morning. Maybe one day we can pry that story out of you. Anyone in the comments section, if you want to hear that story.
See, he's not pretentious at all. They just smoke cigars at 1 o'clock in the morning. Nothing pretentious, sir.
Give us a.
Well, it's too subjective. It's very personal. It's very subjective. I have no proof any of it actually happened. It's so it's to the listener, it'll just sound like a fairy tale. So, and I don't know how beneficial it would be. So that's why I never talk about it directly. Now, there are elements of the story that I do tell. And no, I wasn't on ayahuasca. I've never done ayahuasca or anything like that. I've never consumed or injected a mind-altering substance of any kind that I know of. And in fact, I've never been drunk. And I'm not saying that to boast. I'm just saying that my frame of mind is, especially during those days, I was 19 years old in that jungle. And so, again, I had an encounter. It doesn't directly connect to what happened to these villagers, but it was in the same neighborhood. So very interesting.
Well, Tim, thanks for coming on with us. If anything happens, we'll make sure, ladies and gentlemen, we get on here and we update you. Tim, I want to thank you very much.
Diane, let's hope they ramp it up when Camilla Harris leaves. Okay, guys, this one's over. I thought I'd finish with a sharpening report. Goes for an hour. Where is it? Live videos. Hang on, there it is. No, that wasn't the one I was going to do. Hang on. Oh, man. Oh, there, yeah.
experience 2-for-1 Egypt from $7,999 for 2 people, including flights.
Yeah, Cactus, thank the Lord for Diane's links. We get a lot of info from Diane. Thanks, Di. We really appreciate it. You know that.
The pyramids and temples, cruise the Nile, and much more. Head to tripadeal.com.au. Book now.
A cell phone and an email machine all in one thing.
What do you call it? Patrol officer, criminal investigations, etc. So a lot of life experience, but in my experience in the ministry, I've done a lot of preaching and teaching, particularly on this topic we're going to discuss today. And I've written a lot to it in books published by major Christian publishers, one of them in my most favorite, Defender Publishing, and several books and a lot of research. And again, I mean, that doesn't make me the expert of all experts, but I do know what I'm talking about biblically. And I'm not pulling what I'm going to say. I'm not pulling it out of my back pocket. I mean, it comes from making scriptural connections and as well as scientific connections. So that's kind of my background.
Geez, he cleaned that up, didn't he? I'm not getting it from my back pocket. I was expecting him to say something else. He cleans up well.
Background into all of this. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So leaving aside the UFO and alien abduction phenomena for the moment and just looking at the question, could life exist on other planets? Is there anything in the Bible that would preclude the possibility that there might be life somewhere on other planets?
Yeah. You know, the way you've asked it, is there anything in the Bible that could preclude the possibility? My answer is no. There's not, in my opinion. And I think I even quote Dr. Michael Heiser and several others who are more learned than I am, who have come to the same conclusion, and that is this. Look, I think the Bible is earth and humanity central because that's probably the center of God's heart and his whole plan for the universe. But and there doesn't seem to be a mention in the scriptures of what we would think of as human life on another planet that needs to be redeemed, and Jesus had to go to different planets and die on a cross and rise from the dead. There doesn't seem to be anything that says that. But in the broader scope of the thing, you and I both know, because this is a great thrill of scripture to you and I both, and that is, we know that there are, I mean, scientifically speaking, multiverses, multiple dimensions. And the Bible tells us that. I mean, it tells us there's heaven, there's hell, there's paradise, there's the eternity, there's the chasm between paradise and prison, the holding place for the, I mean, and all of these things are just said. And we see angels coming and going from different dimensions. I mean, when Abraham said he looked up and saw 3 men coming, well, then we find out later it's 2 angels and the Lord himself. Well, so the question is, where'd they come from? Did they live up in the mountains? I mean, does God secretly live in a cave somewhere and he just comes down every now and then and shows us himself? Or did he drop down out of the sky? Or did Abraham see a UFO land and they all got out? No, they're walking through portals. They're coming through dimensions. And now with the study of quantum mechanics and quantum physics and quantum science, we understand that this is so. Now, having said all of that, that then leaves open the possibility that God has done other things in other dimensions. That's none of our business right now. And so I am not going to say, as Dr. Heiser would say, I'm not going to say what God can't do or hasn't done. So anyway, if you just go strictly by the scriptures and that's all you knew, and if you didn't know anything about multiple dimensions of reality other than what the Bible said, you know, we might be able to make a hardcore statement and say, no, there's nothing else besides us. But that's, I'm not prepared to say that. And I think if we discovered human-like life on other planets, I mean, physically and literally, I'm not talking about demonic deception and all that. We're going to get to that. But if we discovered that somehow and God allowed us to, or even if we get to glory and the Lord says, now let me show you what all I've done all over the place and all through all the dimensions, it wouldn't surprise me at all, because is God able to do that? Yes. But anyway, that's a long answer to a short question, but I know that's a lot of people ask that question, so I wanted to be thorough.
Oh, that's a great answer. Yeah, definitely. So talking about the alien abduction phenomena, what do you make of that? Is this demon attacks? Is this hallucinations? Are these actual aliens abducting people? What do you make of the whole alien abduction phenomena?
Okay. Yes, yes, and no. I think some of it's delusion. You know, I mean, it just has to be. I mean, humans are very complex, and we're in a fallen world. And out of the billions and billions of us, bless their hearts, there are people that are delusional. And, you know, and other people seeking some kind of attention, and other people that are on drugs. And, you know, we know that. So leave that category out. When we get down to the double or triple handfuls of what seem to be real brain twisters, like, you know, all the tests you can run on these people are have been run, and they seem to be sane and rational people, and they take lie detector tests, and they're put under hypnosis, and they keep coming up with the same stories. I mean, that gets a little freakier to people. So let's just pretend like, for the sake of this conversation, that those are absolutely real, and that experience actually happened to these people. So then what's the explanation? And I think, and we'll get into this much deeper, I think it's demonic. I truly do not think it's actual physical humanoid type beings from other planets that have developed the technology and the curiosity.
See, this is what Tim Alberino should have said originally.
So far more advanced than we are, to come to us for the sole purpose of trashing the gospel of Jesus Christ and examining us sexually and messing with our minds and terrifying us. I can't even imagine that a culture that advanced that would be what they're up to. See, that sounds more like demonic activity. But anyway, so that's my answer. I think some of these experiences are real. Look, it's like people that get involved, they get sucked into the occult or witchcraft or seances, and they come out of them scared to death saying, I promise you, I saw an entity, a being, and it was my great-great-granddaddy, and I know, and I saw, you know. Well, but the Bible has an answer for that. You're watching demons posing. You know, they're posers. They're mimicking, they're masquerading. Even Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. In fact, I discussed this in one of my books I've written with Defender called Masquerade. So I think some of these experiences have proven to be as real as we can measure them to be real. But what does that mean? And what I'm saying is, I think more than likely, biblically speaking, and even scientifically speaking now, more than likely, we are dealing with interdimensional experiences of some kind of an entity, and I would say an evil entity, and I would say that would be demonic. You see, the Bible, people ask me all the time, do I believe there's other life out there in the universe? My answer is absolutely, and people freak out. Really? You're a preacher. You believe in aliens and little green men from other planets? And I say, well, you didn't ask me that. You asked me if I believed in life out there in the universe. The Bible tells us there's the angelic realm, there's the demonic realm, there's power behind it. Satan is called the prince of the power of the air. There's technology behind it. Again, prince of the power of the air. And in the last days, you know, all kinds of signs and wonders, and fire will be called down from the heavens, and there will be signs in the heavens. You know, something's going to happen. Jesus said people will faint with, well, that's the King James. They will die with heart attacks when they see the terror that's coming upon the earth. That even the elect could be deceived in the last days. See, there's some kind of terrible, terror-invoking deception that is demonic. The Bible says that's coming in the last days. I think those kinds of verses, studied in their context, probably may point to some type of a UFO disclosure. Somehow this UFO phenomena, I believe, has to be involved in the last days deception, because it's so ubiquitous throughout ancient history, right up to modern day times. Our military's talking about it now. Our government's talking about it. Other militaries and other governments of the world are talking about it, revealing videos now in this age of video technology wonder. And how could it not be? I mean, if it's not humanoid beings from other planets, then it's demonic. And a lot of ufologists who have spent decades believing that it was humanoid beings from other planets have now backed way off of that, and they've gone on public record, as you know, saying, no, after all these years, we believe these are entities that have always been among us, always been here, probably interdimensional. They are probably malevolent. They have nothing good designed, and several of them, who I don't think are even believers from after reading their biographies, say this phenomena we now believe is more in line with what the Christians would call demonic activity. So I think that's what we're dealing with, brother. I mean, again, I only know what I know, and everything I know that the scripture says and what modern science says, and then these people that have devoted their lives to studying this matter have said recently in writing and on film. I think we're dealing with interdimensional entities that mean no good to us. And the Bible would describe that.
That's all Timmy Alberino had to say.
As demonic activity.
Yeah, definitely. I can totally see.
Okay, Cactus, good night, mate.
Whatever's going on, it's definitely harmful for humans. Speaking of which, do you believe, some people talk about an alien breeding program. Do you see anything about that in the Bible? Do you believe that accounts of that are true, or is this something else that may have been?
Shawnee, I done a video the other day on the stream, or maybe I didn't, I'm not sure, where they say there's a portal opened above the White House, and it's a portal for the evil spirits to come through, the evil demons and that. And it's perpetually open, it's never shut. Apparently that's what's going on in Washington, D.C.
Misinterpreted.
Yes and no. Now, I'm going to define that so you don't think I'm walking the fence. But no, I don't see anything in the Bible that in those words, black and white, speaks of that in the last days. However, there is a huge connection, and this gets a little complex, but I'm going to make it simple. I've spoken to it in several of my books in great detail, referencing scholars and scientists.
Wow,
so again, all of us scholars and scientists and authors can.
Wow, Diane, that last link about the 3,000 American soldiers at the Red Sea. Wow.
Wrong. So I'm not saying that just because I have a lot of references behind me that I'm 100% right, but I'm saying to your audience here and to
okay, Triggy, love you, mate. Have a good sleep, brother.
Viewers, that I'm not pulling this out of my back pocket. Okay, so no, the Bible doesn't say in the last days there will be aliens that will be breeding with humans.
I mean,
but here's what Jesus said about the last days. It will be just like the days of Noah and just like the days of Lot. In Luke 17, he includes both of those. In Matthew 24, he says like the days of Noah, and he punctuates both of them. And both times, Luke 17 and Matthew 24, he's speaking to totally different audiences, 4 or 5 months apart in different locations of the Roman Empire. So this was a big deal. I mean, Jesus gave us a huge clue about almost not a timeline, but a graphic kind of chronology of the kinds of things that would happen and about when they would happen. Say, Carl, how can you know that? Because Jesus said it would be sort of like, kind of like Noah. No, he didn't say that. He said it'll be a metaphor of it will be Noah. No, he didn't say that. He said it will be just like the days of Noah. Now, in reference to your question. So we go back and we read about the days of Noah, and I don't just go to chapter 6 through 11 of Genesis, because Noah's mentioned in several more places in the Old Testament. He's mentioned throughout the New Testament. He's mentioned in Matthew 24, he's mentioned in Luke 17, and he's mentioned in several other places in the gospel. He's also mentioned by Peter. He's mentioned by the writer of Hebrews. I mean, so when you pull it all together, we start with that scary little verse in Genesis 6 that said, and in those days, what days? The days of Noah. the sons of God came unto the daughters of men. Now, this could be a 4-hour teaching, and I've written several books. Dr. Michael Heiser is the king of all of this. He's written several books, The Unseen Realm being, I guess, his masterpiece on this. But that term, as most of your audience probably will know, it comes from the Hebrew phrase, B'nai Elohim, the sons of God. And that specific phrase is only used 5 or 6 times in the Old Testament. There are other phrases that are similar to it. And in English, when you're trying to translate from ancient Hebrew, sometimes the translations aren't that great. But every time that exact phrase is used, it is interpreted in every English translation as divine beings or angels, except in Genesis 6, where that same phrase is used. But almost every scholarly translation translates it literally, when the sons of God. They don't say when the angels from another realm came unto the daughter, or when divine beings entered in through a wormhole from another realm and came unto the. It just says the sons of God. Because what it is, it's so freaky to our mind, because then now it involves potential sexual involvement, you know, and there would go to the breeding thing. Or to the very least, I write in my research of this, at the very least, I think it means that there was something, I'm just going to use this word, it's a modern word, something technological going on. There was some, well, what do we find in the UFO captivity phenomena? They say, well, I was probed and prodded and my sexual organs were examined and my, and they scoped up into me, and examined the womb and the uterus and the birth canal. And I mean, you'll hear these things. And so I can kind of envision that Satan and the demonic realm that was in the process of this whole fallen creation since the garden, there was something about the birth process.
Time that well.
Process and the womb and the ability that humans have to create themselves that God gave to us, like a Xerox machine. We can zoom off copies of ourselves, and so there was some kind of curiosity, maybe even some kind of ability. People say, well, angels can't have sex with humans. Well, actually, the Bible doesn't clearly say that, either in the Hebrew or.
Diane, I'm going to stream that pretty soon, that architecture of Washington. I'm going to make a stream of that, make a day of it.
Greek. Some will refer to Jesus where it says, well, in heaven they're neither given or taken in marriage like they are. But that says nothing about reproduction. It really doesn't. He's just talking about the institution of marriage as we know it, and the necessity for marriage as we know it in a world that's perfect and not fallen. None of that will be a necessity, is what Jesus is saying. He's telling the Pharisees, you're thinking of it all wrong. You're thinking of it strictly earthly. But when we are in glory, it's not just another form of earth. It's a glorified everything. No more sin, no more death, no more pain, no more death, all these things. So when we get back to the Genesis account, we run into this thing that was either one of two things by the wording there. It says, because then they came unto them and had children by them. Well, in the most normal use of the Hebrew language and the English language, that would mean like we know it in our mind of producing children. But could it have been technological? I mean, we think we invented test tube babies and CRISPR-Cas9 technologies and and genetic editing. I don't think that the demonic realm has ever looked at these kinds of things and said, gee, we didn't know that could be done. I can't believe these humans figured something like that. No, I think this knowledge has been around, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's good things from CRISPR-Cas9 and genetic editing and mRNA research, but there's evil that can be attached to it as well. And you remember what was Satan's temptation to Adam and Eve? You can be like us who, the angelic realm, the sons of God. You can be like us. And what some translations says, you can be like God, and that's because the word Elohim, it could be either the multiplicity of the angelic realm.
Oh, good, you're back, Chris. I'm glad you sorted it, mate.
Or God himself, the creator of all, and it just depends upon the context. But in either way, Satan is saying, you can know all the stuff we know. all the stuff about creation and everything, if you will sit down at my feet and let me eat of the fruit I
like Carl Gallup's, guys. He's one of the best.
I will bring to you. So it's got to be, Josh, and then we get to Peter and Jude in the New Testament, and we read very clearly about some class of divine beings that are now being held in the deepest dungeons of the prison of Hades, hell, prison, waiting for the great judgment of
the moaning angels underneath the Euphrates. We've all heard that one, guys.
Last days. And both of those cases in Jude and Peter, it extrapolates back with imagery of the days of Noah and the flood and Sodom and Gomorrah kind of activity. It says that. So that seems to connect directly with that thing that happened in the days of Noah in Genesis 6. So the point is, I told you this was complex, but I don't, I could just say yes or no to your question and we move on, and then people would be divided and freaked out. So I'm trying to give some contextual foundation, scientific and biblical. So I know that the concept of alien human breeding is huge on the internet. And some would have us to believe that about half of the 8 billion people on the planet are hybrids. And that may be, but you hear Jesus say it's going to be just like the days of Noah. So what does that mean? It means, it almost has to mean, in my humble opinion, I could be wrong, but it almost has to mean that either there is some kind of literal, physical, in the last days, some of that demonic presence is going to be released, and you read in the book of Revelation about the chasm coming open and the demonic powers coming out. You read about the demonic that lead the kings of the earth astray. I mean, that's in the book of Revelation. You hear Paul talk about in the last days, doctrines of demons will flood the earth. And that word doctrine doesn't just apply to biblical teaching. It applies to teaching of facts and truth and knowledge. So facts and truth and knowledge of demons will flood the earth in the last days. So it's got to mean, when Jesus said it'll be just like, and those are his words, not my words. Just like means just like. It's got to mean that Genesis 6 is included, which has got to mean one of two things, in my opinion. Either there's some kind of demonic outpouring wherein these angels that have been held in captivity. See, can all the angelic realm procreate with humans if that was ever possible in the beginning? The Bible doesn't tell us. But if they could, and if that's what Peter and Jude are talking about, there was at least a class that could. There was some type. So there's either going to be that happening again in the last days, because Jesus said it'd be just like, or it will be attached to some kind of technology wherein, watch this, all flesh becomes corrupted again. That's what happened in Noah's day. And brother, we're the first generation since the days of Noah to see it happening again right before our eyes. mRNA technology has the ability to deliver complete corruption of flesh. In fact, the chief medical officer of Moderna, he's on a TED Talks video as we speak. I heard him say, we are rewriting the code of life. We are feeding new information. As your genome is like an operating system. He means like a computer. We're feeding it lines of code. We're switching off switches and switching on to other switches. It's astounding. And this has only happened in the last 10 years, that. And then prior to that, CRISPR-Cas9, the ability to cut and snip biologically the genome and recreate things, and using that to grow human livers inside of a pig, they think, and things like that. Brother, that's what Jesus said. So alien and human breeding, maybe, and if that's interpretation is proper from Genesis 6 and Peter and Jude, and that somehow that happened and God said,
you're about to enter a world of
that you've stepped way over the line, and he put them until the last days. That seems to be the inference. And then in the last days, there's an outpouring. Well, then that could happen, I guess. Now, there are people that I know that I think probably came from aliens. I'm being funny. You know, I mean, listen, the human race is amazing because there's all colors, there's all shapes and sizes, yet you cut us open and we're human. We're human, you know? But so it would be easy, if this is happening, for the demonic to hide that within 8 billion people all over the planet. And there's still places on our planet where really no human foot has ever set foot. Oh, now we have satellites and we, you know, but still we haven't gotten down, put our feet on the soil, and many, 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 many millions of miles of territory all over the surface of this globe. It would be fairly easy for the demonic to hide that kind of process, if that's what's happening. But I say this, regardless, I mean, there may be people listening saying, oh, you're both nuts. That's crazy. That's just pure science fiction. Well, just remember almost everything we're living with today.
I couldn't stream one day, so what happened, I went to go live and it wouldn't actually go live. It would just keep doing the round thing. So I ended up having to get one of them companies that go through your computer and gets rid of all the viruses and all that. So I started doing that, and I'm talking to whoever the person was who was doing it, and he said because at the time I had 160 subscribers, he said for a channel of 160 subscribers, you are very heavily monitored. He said that. And the old guys here, the guys who have been here a long time, they know how. This is my 7th or 8th channel. I'm not sure which, but it's somewhere up there. And I'm heavily monitored. So would you be, Chris?
It was pure science fiction 20 years ago. The internet included, cell phones and CRISPR-Cas9 and mRNA and everything. It was all science fiction just 20, 25 years ago. But it's not now. We're living it. So I would be careful to dismiss it as just pure science fiction simply because your mind wants to shut down on it. And I would say that at the very least, though, there's some kind of demonic infusion of technological knowledge in the last days that's going to do some corrupting of flesh, animal and human. And when you think about this, my friend, when I draw people's attention to this, it usually snaps something in their brain. A light bulb comes on. Think of when God leveled his curses upon Adam and Eve and Satan. He leveled a curse upon Eve and the birthing process. And Satan's curse was pretty close to it. He said, your curse is, from the womb of a woman, the birthing process, will come a seed, a child. God's saying, I'm going to use a child to defeat your kingdom. And he's going to come from the womb of a woman. And it's going to be directed by heaven's throne, and he will crush your head. And I want to add these words. The same kind of junk you were trying to pervert, I'm going to use it to destroy you. I mean, that's what I see. Now, again, that's just my speculation. That's not the word of God. But everything I said prior to my speculation is in the word of God. So I think it all goes to the question you asked. I'm sorry I took so long to answer it, but this is one of those questions that's near and dear to me. People ask me all the time. And to me, it demands a little bit of biblical foundation and scientific foundation to wrap people's heads around it.
So in your opinion, what exactly are UFOs?
Okay. Well, science has spoken to this. You've asked my opinion, but science has spoken. And of course, you can take UFO only means, as you know, and your audience knows, something that's flying in the air that's unidentifiable at the moment. Well, there's been a lot of explanations, and some of those explanations have turned out to be true. It's military aircraft, it's technology that's being worked on, it's just something you thought you saw that you didn't. Maybe it was just a jet airplane. The sun caught it just right and kind of eliminated the wings, and it looked like a sliver going through the air, and that was actually an airliner, swamp gas and all this stuff. And believe it or not, some of that has panned out that that's exactly what it was. But we're still left with what a lot of experts now call are UFOs, residual UFOs, meaning all of that's left over from everything we've been able to explain and verify. Not just explain away, but explain. Okay. So now we're left with the residuals. Well, I can give you, we can talk about examples in our lifetime as we're doing this show. Residual UFOs are those that the U.S. Navy can't figure out, and they've got them on video. Okay, that's residual. Why? Well, because the number one superpower in the world, with arguably the best technology in the world. There are a few others that have technology approaching ours, but there's still a lot of it they've stolen from us, you know, China and Russia, you know, and they could have some more advanced stuff than we do. But the most technologically advanced society that the planet has ever seen looks at these things. They try to track them, they try to chase them, they try to keep up with. Not only can they not, but they're being described as objects of flight. They don't know what they are, so those are UFOs that are defying the laws of earthly physics. Now, scientists describe it that way. Pilots, Air Force pilots, Navy pilots describe it that way. Ufologists are describing it that way. Experts in physics and scientists are looking at this stuff and they're saying, there's nothing on earth that can do that. Yet there it is. You can see it. You can hear the guys live talking over their radios, freaking out. I mean, you know, people say, well, it was all staged. Well, that's pretty elaborate.
Okay, Diane, good night.
I guess it could have been, but just take it at face value. When you pull all this stuff together, those are what we would refer to as UFOs.
And Diane, thanks for the links. We really love your links. You know that.
That is, are UFOs. Residual. That's not swamp gas. It's not an airliner with the sun shining on it at an angle, and is documented. And you know, I don't think I'm stretching this by saying thousands of hours of this documentation over the last several decades. This has been going on, which also precludes it from being, or excludes it, excuse me, from being just simple, some kind of technology we're working on. You know, people thought well, that's DARPA stuff. We're just not allowed to know. Well, DARPA's got some stuff that, you know, we're not allowed to know, but the problem is these kinds of videos and or sightings have been going.
Nothing like the ocean breeze in your fur. Am I right?
Going on from military personnel for decades. And we didn't have anything that even approached that technology decades ago. Nobody on the planet did. Now, even decades later in our time, we still don't have anything that approaches it, even though we could envision that maybe DARPA or something like that is getting close to something like this. But I mean, we're talking about spacecraft they saw, or craft, unidentified craft they saw that was just zipping along near the surface of the ocean and then instantly went straight up, be out of the atmosphere, and then back down, then went under the water in some cases, and then reemerged, and all at the speed of whatever. I don't know. They couldn't keep up with it. They said it was unearthly. It was inhuman, but yet it was obviously guided by intelligence. So that's what UFO means. And that's the kind of stuff we're interested in. Where is that coming from? What intelligence is behind it? Is it really beings from other planets that are so technologically advanced that they're down here showing off? Speaking of which, and it goes straight to your question again, but a lot of these ufologists that I have documented in my books, pointing behind me because they're on the shelf behind me, I have documented in my books, have actually and literally said that now they've come to the conclusion these are not humanoid kind of beings from other planets that are just more advanced than we are. These are interdimensional entities, they call them. And several of them have said, and they're showing off. They want us to see them. They want us to know, and this sounds like a horror movie, they're here. And I think this ties into the last days, and we'll talk about that more in a moment in prophecy. I truly do. And I think the scripture speaks to it metaphorically, giving us foreshadowing of this kind of thing. It could be wrong, but we'll talk about that. But so anyway, that's what we're talking about when we say UFOs, and that phenomena is real. It's captured on film now by credible people, with many other credible people, scientists, etc., looking at it, people that deal in technology, and they're bumfuzzled by it. from all the reports that have been released to us.
Yeah, speaking of these films and things that keep getting released, is there actual, I mean, I guess that would count as physical evidence because it's a video and, you know, of course, videos can be faked or, you know, whatever. There's
Yes.
always that. But is there physical evidence to show that there is something physical going on here? And if
Yes.
so, what do we say to Christians or to anybody who says, well, there's no physical evidence to this phenomenon whatsoever?
That's just an untrue statement. Yes, there is physical evidence. And as you said, the videos, huge physical evidence, eyewitness from multiplicity of pilots seeing and tracking it at the same time, recording it. But as you said, I wrote about this in Masquerade, I believe, and I quoted Dr. Michael Heiser, and he quotes others and has a whole resource, and I used all of those and kind of conglomerated them together and put them in my book to quickly answer that question, because it's a good question and people ask that. But the answer is a resounding yes. There is physical evidence. It's been collected down through the years, or somebody would say a spacecraft landed somewhere, and then they would go back and check, and sure enough, you know, there was burnt up grass and or whatever radioactive material in the ground, and you know, and these kinds of things are recorded. Now, and people would say, well, the demonic can't do that. What do you mean can't? The demonic can do anything that has to do with technology. You know, the demonic can't create something out of nothing like God can. They can't create life out of nothing. They can manipulate what's already there like we can. We can take a genome here and a genome there and do some CRISPR-Cas9 on it. But where did the genome come from? Where did the DNA come from? Where did how does the DNA, how does protein molecules know how to communicate to create a human being? That's that intelligence behind it all, you see. And so you know, when you're dealing with this phenomena of physical evidence, yeah, there's a lot of it. At least enough, you know, we don't have like truckloads and truckloads of it, but there's enough of it from around the world over time to say, yeah, this is not just psychological stuff, or I saw something in there and my eyes fooled me. No, we've captured it on video. No, we've gone to some of these spots and recorded radiation and saw imprints in the ground. And people say, well, why would the demonic do that? To announce they're here, to deceive us, to masquerade as little green men from other planets. See, that's the perfect way. I mean, if I'm Satan and I want to get the whole world, we already know the whole world is manipulated most by fear. Fear. Now, love overcomes fear, and love only comes from the heart of God, but most of the planet does not have a heart for Jesus Christ and the Word of God and God. So they're motivated by fear. We see that in the pandemics and, you know, and the closing down of everything overnight. Fear, we're all going to die, fear. Well, Satan knows this. He's watching this. He's watching even the church's reaction to all of this right now. And so if you could imagine that, bringing something like this to the planet, and then like a criminal who's trying to mislead would leave behind DNA evidence, or would put a gun there, but it wasn't the gun used, or they would wipe the fingerprints off, or whatever. You know, they would leave physical evidence, maybe on purpose, to mislead or to misdirect the investigators. Well, if we humans can be that evil and conniving, how much more the demonic realm? How much more the demonic realm? That's where humans learn their evil from. If they're not saved, they learn it from Satan whispering in their ear and from demonic manipulation. So yeah, there is physical evidence. It has been recorded in various ways. And my explanation for it is, why would they do that? I just gave it. Because it's a deception. It's a masquerade. We're being groomed. We're being set up for that thing that Jesus spoke of. And I don't know when Jesus said this, he was talking about UFOs. But when he said there's going to come a deception, guys, in the last days, that could even fool the very elect, if that were possible. And people will die from heart attacks when they see the terror that's coming upon the world. You know, I mean, listen to the language. So let me give an example. Whenever I talk about this, I use this example. think of what if the Lord was going to come this week in his kingdom glory. Well, let's say a few months from now, but Satan knew it. And so he had to try to pull off his last great deception. And Satan knows his time is short, by the way. Revelation 12:12 says that. He's filled with rage, and you can see it all over the planet. He knows it's coming. So to try to hold on to it, he's got to create this global fear and panic to cause everybody to bow down to his man, to whom he's going to give supernatural powers to call fire from heaven, to deceive, images that will move and talk. I mean, it's all in the book of Revelation. What does that mean? We don't know yet, but in our minds, this is the point I'm getting to. In our modern minds, in this day and time, if the world is allowed to go on for hundreds of more years, we can't even imagine the technology that's coming. Just like 20 years ago, we couldn't imagine the technology we're using right now. Okay? So, but if it's not allowed to go on for hundreds more years, let's say this is it. This is kind of the apex of the technology. Then in our life, if Satan is going to deceive the whole world, now watch this, Josh, even the very elect, and all that word means is people like you and me. The word elect doesn't mean perfect. It just means we are believers in the word of God. We believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. He's the coming King. We're filled with the Holy Spirit who leads us into all wisdom and knowledge, who takes away fear. God has not given us this spirit of fear. He's given us the Holy Spirit. Okay, we're the elect. But Jesus said, but even Josh and Carl, if they're there during that time, could be deceived. If that were possible. Now, when he puts that qualifier there, here's how I interpret it. It's highly possible that Josh and Carl will be deceived for just a little bit. But it's not possible for them to stay deceived because they have the spirit of truth in them. But this thing that's coming is so big that people are going to die when they see it. They're going to have heart attacks. And even God's people like Josh and Carl will be protected from that. But for a minute, we might just be startled out of our pants. And then we say, wait. And the Holy Spirit says, and to us, and then we begin to say, this is what Jesus was talking about. Okay, what could that be? Now, here's my question. Here's the $1 million question. In the world we live in, brother, it's going to take a lot to fool Josh and Carl. You know, I'm not saying we're the most brilliant people in the world, but think of all the technology we already know about. I mean, holographic images, we can project in the sky. I mean, you know, all of the technology we have. What's it going to take to make Josh and Carl come right up next to a heart attack if we see it? Or to almost question our faith for a little bit if we see it? What would it take? The only thing at this point in human history that I can imagine would be something like, envision this scenario. I know this is going to sound science fiction. It sounds like a movie, but watch. What if you and I right now, we concluded this interview, both of us walked outside. You're in one part of the United States, I'm in another part. We walked outside. We looked up in the sky, and it was filled with spacecraft that were like 4 and 5 football field lengths. I mean, thousands, tens of thousands of them hovering over the earth. People would be screaming. I mean, sirens going off. All militaries of the world would be called to action. I mean, can you imagine? There would be people dying of heart attacks. Nobody would stop and say, oh, that's a hologram, but it's all over the world. You and I both would be startled. Maybe even, I'm going to go ahead and admit, I'm a pretty brave guy. I was a cop for years. I've been shot at people, but I'd be scared for a little bit. If I walked out and saw that, I'd be more than startled. But I don't think it would be long before the Holy Spirit of God would begin to minister to my heart, and I would begin to say, oh my gosh, it's here. This is it. This is the great deception. So that's just one scenario, and I'm just pulling this out of my head and out of my back pocket. But it's connected to scripture utterances from Jesus and from the Old Testament and from the New Testament about the last days. And I'm going to tell you something else I've written about that fits to this, brother. And again, it's a biblical speculation, but I went back, even some of the classic scholars saw this possibility and wrote about it with the best language they had. It's in my book, Masquerade. Remember when Jesus is asked about the last days, and in Matthew 24, he's going through this litany, and one of the things he says, let me tell you something else that's going to happen. And I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, but you put it in modern English, he said, all over the earth, there are going to be false messiahs. And there's going to be false prophets that are going to be coming, talking about these false messiahs coming. And they're going to say, look, he's out in the desert. No, they're over here. They're on the Temple Mount. No, they're over here. No, they're in the seat of power over here. He says, no, no, no. He says, when the true Messiah comes, the Son of Man, it will be like lightning from the east to the west. You won't be able to miss it. Now, I did some deep search into those words, and I've got this study in the Book of Masquerade. And then I went back to some of the classical scholars, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, just to see any inkling. I actually ran across several that said he is not talking about the false prophets and messiahs that we would think of now. He's talking about something in the last days that we cannot even yet imagine, that has to do with entities. One guy said entities masquerading, and that's why I put it in my book, because they use the title of my book, masquerading as messiahs and saviors to the world.
Wow.
And they will first be announced by people saying that they are coming. I mean, they actually said this a couple of hundred years ago, and they didn't say UFOs or aliens. They were just talking about this. And I thought, oh my gosh, the prophecies are already going all. I mean, people write about it. The movies are prophesying it. Video games are prophesying it. The zombie apocalypse and the UFO invasions. There's a new one out right now as we're speaking. I forgot, it's called the end of the time, or the last war. I think it's called the last war, something like that. That's what it's. Yeah, Tomorrow War. Yeah, it's all about this invasion of UFOs and everything, and they're prophesying. And what if that's their purpose? As these ufologists who have been studying this for decades are now saying, they want us to see them. They are preparing us for something. What do you think their message is going to be? We are your savior. We're going to keep you guys from killing each other in this nuclear war you almost started. Bow down. Worship us. We are the reasons you're here in the first place. We created you, or whatever. We are your savior. You don't believe it? Let me show you some signs and wonders. Revelation says that whole system of the Antichrist and the beast system will be empowered by the dragon, who is Satan. He will give them his power. Well, what's his power? He's the prince of the power of the air. You understand? So when you tie those things together, again, I'm not dogmatic, because there's no place in the Bible that says these words. In the last days, UFOs are going to come down out of this air. They're going to land, and these people are going to get out, these human-like things, and they're going to claim to be the saviors of the world. No place says that. But when you take all that we know from science, all that we know from physical evidence, all that's happened in our lifetime, all that we know from scientific manipulation, all that we know about ubiquitous global evil, all that we know about what Jesus said, people dying, that is so terrifying, people being, even God's people could be deceived if that were possible. When you take all of that and cram it together, and then you look at what the movies, I mean, listen, I'm not speaking about individuals, but Hollywood as a whole and everything that has spawned off of it, different movie making projects. Back in Hitler's day, they realized propaganda, man, propaganda. We can tell people what we're going to do and get them prepared for it, so when it happens, they won't freak out so much, but yet we can still do it to them. That's what that was all about.
Yeah.
Hollywood has seized upon that. How many times you get on the internet and find these videos that are made about a movie is made that says certain things, and then 30 years later it happens to the letter, and people are freaking out. How did they know that? Well, I think they either set it up and then did it, self-fulfilling prophecy, or it was demonic knowledge that was infused into the hearts and minds and imaginations of the creators of those films. So if that's true, then if these false messiahs being spoken of by false prophets, Jesus talks about in Matthew 24, happen to be those that manifest themselves in the last days, that come through these demonic wormholes and portals. The words wormhole and portal are not in the Bible, but different dimensions are, and excursions and encroachments from those dimensions, that's mentioned in the Bible. I mean, this might be what we're being set up for, which is why you're examining this.
It's amazing to think about that we could be headed towards that day now. And what's really strange is that we today are living in a day where the government is actually openly admitting to having some knowledge and even being involved in some research having to do with this UFO phenomenon.